The honey trap. The hidden psychology of seduction, deception, and control. You've probably sensed it before, that unsettling feeling when someone's interest feels too perfect, when their attention is too precise, when they seem to know exactly what you want to hear, exactly when you want to hear it. It's not that they're charming, it's that their charm feels engineered, calculated, almost rehearsed, and somewhere beneath the warmth, something cold is watching. Most people go through life believing they can spot manipulation. They trust their instincts. They believe they'd recognize deception if they saw it. They assume flattery is harmless. They think attention is always genuine. They believe that if someone seems interested, it's because they are interested. They think they'd notice as if someone was using them. They imagine manipulation looks like obvious lies, like pressure, like something they'd spot from a distance. And again, they're caught off guard. Not because they're foolish, not because they're naive, not because they lack intelligence, but because no one ever taught them how sophisticated emotional manipulation can actually be. No one ever showed them how seduction and deception can wear the exact same face. No one ever explained that the most dangerous traps don't look like traps at all. This audiobook exists for that reason, because honey traps, in all their forms, don't look like traps. They look like opportunities. They feel like connection. They sound like love. They arrive dressed as everything you've been waiting for. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. People don't seduce you by being obviously seductive. They seduce you by giving you exactly what you've been missing. They don't manipulate by being controlling. They manipulate by being irresistible. They don't trap you by forcing you. They trap you by making you want to give everything freely. And when someone finally gives you the attention, validation, and desire you've been craving, you don't question it. You surrender to it. You embrace it. You protect it. You defend it against anyone who might suggest it's not real, because it feels too good to question. Because it feels like finally, you're being seen. But behavior leaks the truth. The honey trap is not just about espionage. It's not just about spies and intelligence agencies and dramatic betrayals. It's about emotional engineering. It's about understanding human vulnerability so precisely that a person willingly gives away what they'd never hand over under threat. It's about using attraction as a weapon. It's about mapping someone's psychological landscape, finding the empty spaces, the hungry places, the wounds that never healed, and becoming exactly what those wounds have been crying out for. And whether deployed by intelligence agencies, criminal organizations, toxic partners, narcissists, or con artists, the psychology is the same. The architecture is the same. The method is the same. The honey trap works because it targets the most powerful force in human behavior, the need to be loved, chosen, validated, and desired. It does not fight against that need, it uses it, it feeds it. It becomes the answer to every question you've ever asked about your worth. And when someone finally seems to answer all those questions, you don't want to examine the answer, you just want to hold on to it. This audiobook is not about becoming a manipulator. It's not about learning how to trap others. It's about understanding manipulation so deeply that you can never be caught in it again. It's about seeing the architecture beneath the seduction. The timing, the mirroring, the vulnerability mining, the emotional conditioning, the gradual escalation that makes the target believe they're the one in control. It's about recognizing the blueprint before the building is complete. It's about understanding the psychology so thoroughly that you can spot the signs long before you're emotionally invested. Most failed defenses against manipulation don't come from lack of intelligence. They come from unrecognized hunger. They come from wounds that haven't been acknowledged. They come from a place inside that is so desperate for something that it will believe anything, overlook anything, rationalize anything, just to keep the illusion alive. You assume others have the same values you have. You assume attraction is innocent. You assume someone's interest is about you. You assume that someone who says they care actually cares. You assume that intensity equals sincerity. But honey traps don't operate on assumptions. They operate on psychology. They identify what you lack, what you long for, what you've been denied, what you secretly believe you don't deserve. And they become that thing, perfectly, patiently, unstoppably. There's a quiet power in understanding honey traps. When you know the blueprint, you stop being seduced by the surface. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop mistaking mirroring for connection. You stop believing that someone who seems too good to be true is simply your lucky break. You start asking better questions. You start seeing what they're not showing. You start noticing the gaps, the inconsistencies, the timing that's just too perfect, the way they always seem to know exactly what to say, the way they never seem to have their own vulnerabilities, the way they always redirect conversations back to you. You start seeing the architecture beneath the performance. This audiobook will guide you through the hidden mechanics behind honey traps. You'll learn why flattery works even when you know it's flattery. Why emotional vulnerability creates bonding that bypasses logic. Why people give away secrets not under threat, but under love. Why silence and withholding are just as powerful as seduction. Why the most dangerous honey trap doesn't look dangerous at all. Why the predator's greatest weapon is your own desire. You'll learn to recognize the stages of the trap, from the initial identification of your vulnerabilities to the final extraction of what you never meant to give. You'll also confront something deeper. The reason honey traps work isn't just because of the seducer. It's because of the target. Everyone has a wound. Everyone has a craving. Everyone has a place inside them that is starving for something. Everyone has a question about their worth that hasn't been answered, and the honey trap finds that place. Not by accident, by design. The seducer does not guess. They probe, they test, they listen, they notice. They watch for what makes you light up, what makes you defensive, what makes you vulnerable. They map your emotional terrain, and then they become exactly what that terrain demands. Once you become aware of your own vulnerabilities, you gain something rare. The ability to recognize when someone is feeding your hunger rather than loving you. The ability to distinguish between being desired and being used. The ability to choose clarity over craving. The ability to say, this feels wonderful, but I need to see what it really is. The ability to slow down, to observe, to ask questions, to wait. The ability to protect yourself without becoming cold, to be open without being naive, to trust without surrendering. As you listen, don't rush. Let the patterns sink in. Let the examples connect to moments you've lived or witnessed. This isn't information meant to scare you. It's insight meant to protect you. It's knowledge meant to free you from the illusion that you're immune, that it couldn't happen to you, that you'd see it coming. By the end of this audiobook, you won't see seduction the same way. You'll see the architecture beneath it. You'll see the mechanisms that make it work. You'll see the psychology that makes even the smartest people vulnerable. And once you see the architecture, you can never be trapped by it again, not because you're suspicious of everyone, but because you know what to look for. You don't need to become paranoid. You don't need to withdraw from connection. You don't need to fear intimacy. You don't need to assume everyone is a predator. You simply need to see clearly. You simply need to recognize the difference between being desired for who you are and being desired for what you have. You simply need to know the difference between someone who loves you and someone who needs something from you. You simply need to trust observation over performance, consistency over intensity, behavior over words, and clarity, quiet, steady, unshakable clarity is where real protection begins. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The honey trap is not what you think. Most people believe a honey trap is obvious. They imagine a beautiful spy, a seductive stranger, a dramatic reveal, a scene straight out of a movie. They think they'd recognize it immediately. They think they'd never fall for it. They imagine manipulation looks like pressure, like obvious lies, like something they'd spot from a distance. They imagine they'd feel suspicious, that their instincts would warn them, that they'd sense something was off. They imagine the trap would look like a trap. But if you slow down and study the actual psychology of honey traps, if you examine how they actually operate in the real world, not in movies, not in spy novels, but in actual human interactions, you begin to notice something deeply uncomfortable. The most effective honey traps don't look like traps. They look like dreams coming true. They look like everything you ever wanted. They feel like love at first sight. They seem like fate, like destiny, like the universe finally rewarding you for all the years of waiting. They arrive with perfect timing, perfect words, perfect attention, and in that moment, you don't question it. You don't want to question it. Questioning it feels like questioning your own good fortune. Questioning it feels like pushing away the very thing you've been praying for. From childhood, human beings learn a quiet lesson that shapes almost every interaction they'll ever have. Love must be earned. Attention is scarce. Being desired is the ultimate validation. If you're not chosen, you're not worthy. If you're not wanted, you're not enough. These beliefs become cravings. They become hungers. They become wounds that never fully heal. And cravings unmet become vulnerabilities. They become the soft place in your armor, the place where someone can slip through. They become the thing that bypasses your logic, your caution, your carefully constructed defenses. So when someone appears who seems to satisfy those cravings, effortlessly, perfectly, completely, the mind doesn't question. It celebrates. It surrenders. It believes it's finally being rewarded for all the waiting. It believes this is the moment it's been waiting for. It believes finally, someone sees what everyone else missed. This is the genius of the honey trap. It doesn't fight your defenses. It doesn't try to break through your walls. It doesn't pressure or coerce. It simply becomes the thing you've been waiting for, and then lets you open the door yourself, lets you invite it in. You offer everything without being asked, because you want to, because offering feels like love, because giving feels like connection, because you don't want to be the kind of person who holds back, who doesn't trust, who ruins something beautiful with suspicion and doubt. Every honey trap is customized. Different targets require different bait. For the lonely, it offers attention. For the ambitious, it offers admiration. For the insecure, it offers certainty. For the powerful, it offers surrender. For the deprived, it offers abundance. For the unseen, it offers visibility. For the unheard, it offers listening. For the unappreciated, it offers worship. The trap doesn't look like a trap because it's wearing the face of your deepest desire. It's not asking you for anything. It's offering you everything. It's not demanding anything. It's inviting you to give freely. It's not threatening anything. It's promising everything. The problem is not that honey traps exist. The problem is forgetting that not every gift is a gift. Not every desire is real. Not every connection is genuine. Not every expression of love is love. The problem is forgetting that people can mirror what they don't feel. That they can perform what they don't experience. That they can offer what they don't possess. The problem is forgetting that the most dangerous people are not the ones who threaten you. They are the ones who complete you, because completion, false completion, is the most seductive illusion of all. Why obvious traps are rare. The most effective manipulations are never obvious. Obvious traps get avoided. Obvious lies get rejected. Obvious pressure creates resistance. Obvious manipulation triggers suspicion. People are not stupid. They sense pressure. They sense falseness. They sense when something doesn't align. That's why skilled manipulators don't use obvious methods. They don't push. They don't demand. They don't threaten. They don't coerce. They do the opposite. They create desire before they ask for anything. They build connection before they reveal their interest. They make you believe you're the one pursuing, the one choosing, the one in control. They make you believe this was your idea, your choice, your decision. They make you believe you're falling in love, and that love is the most natural thing in the world. And then, when you're completely convinced this is your idea, when you're completely convinced you've found something real, when you're completely convinced you're the lucky one, they ask, and you give. Not because you're forced, because you want to. Because you want to prove your love, your loyalty, your devotion. Because by then you'd give them anything. Because by then you can't imagine saying no. Because by then saying no feels like destroying something beautiful. Because by then you're more afraid of losing them than you are of anything else. And they know that. They counted on it. They engineered it. This is why intelligence agencies, criminal organizations, skilled predators, toxic partners, and con artists all use the same principles, not because they're evil, because they work. Human psychology is predictable, and predictable patterns can be exploited. You don't need to be a genius to manipulate someone. You just need to understand what they want more than anything, and then become that thing, patiently, persistently, perfectly. This is why honey traps don't look like honey traps, because if they did, no one would fall for them. If they did, they wouldn't work. They work because they look like love. They work because they feel like fate. They work because they arrive as the answer to your prayers, not as the threat to your safety. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already given everything. You've already surrendered. You've already crossed lines you never thought you'd cross. You've already told secrets you never thought you'd share. You've already done things you never imagined you'd do. Because by then you're not thinking, you're feeling, and feeling, without observation, is a trap. The comfort of believing you're special. Many people prefer the illusion. Believing that someone's intense interest is genuine feels better than questioning it. It validates every insecurity you've ever had. It confirms that you are desirable, worthy enough. It reassures every doubt. It soothes every fear. It answers every question you've ever asked about your worth. It tells you that you weren't crazy for believing you deserved love. It tells you that everyone who overlooked you was wrong. It tells you that this person sees what others missed. It tells you that you are finally chosen. So you accept the flattery. You accept the attention. You accept the extraordinary interest. You rationalize the timing. You explain away the questions. You ignore the subtle probing. You dismiss the inconsistencies. You reframe the red flags as quirks. You reinterpret the pressure as passion. You mistake escalation for affection. You mistake interrogation for curiosity. You mistake mirroring for connection. You mistake intensity for intimacy. You mistake performance for sincerity. You mistake manipulation for love. And then when the trap closes, it feels sudden. It feels like betrayal. It feels like everything was a lie, even though it was quietly tightening the entire time, even though the signs were there, even though something somewhere whispered that something was off. Understanding that honey traps are designed to feel like love is not about becoming cynical. It's about becoming accurate. It's about learning to distinguish between what feels good and what is good, between what you want to believe and what is actually true, between the performance and the reality, between the mask and the face. It's about learning to trust what you see, not what you hope. It's about learning to wait, to observe, to question, to protect yourself without closing yourself off. How observe without becoming paranoid? Seeing the architecture of a honey trap does not require suspicion of everyone. It does not require living in fear. It does not require becoming cold or distant. It requires slowing down. It requires pausing when something feels too good to be true. It requires asking questions rather than accepting answers. It requires separating intensity from intimacy, pattern from performance, timing from coincidence. It requires recognizing that real connection takes time, that real love doesn't rush, that real intimacy isn't built overnight. It requires understanding that if someone seems perfect, they might be performing. If someone seems too interested, they might want something. If someone seems to know you better than anyone, they might be watching more than listening. Instead of asking, do they like me? Ask, what do they want from me? Instead of asking, why is this happening? Ask, what is being built here? Instead of asking, am I being loved? Ask, am I being used? These questions shift you from passive recipient to active observer. They shift you from victim to witness. They shift you from someone who is being seduced to someone who is seeing. You don't need to confront. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to withdraw emotionally. You simply need to watch. Watch what they ask about. Watch what they remember. Watch what they mirror. Watch what they reveal and what they hide. Watch how quickly they escalate. Watch how they react when you say no. Watch how they behave when things don't go their way. Watch what happens when you set a boundary. Real intimacy can tolerate boundaries. Real love can tolerate space. Real connection doesn't demand constant contact. Real affection doesn't require constant validation. Real care doesn't disappear when you're not useful. Real interest doesn't fade when you're not available. Watch what they do, not just what they say. Watch what they prioritize, not just what they promise. Watch who they are when no one is looking, not just who they are when you're watching. Watch how they treat others, not just how they treat you. Watch how they handle disagreement, not just how they handle agreement. Watch how they respond to your doubts, not just how they respond to your admiration. Watch how they react to your boundaries, not just how they react to your openness. The power of quiet awareness. Most people are exhausted from being confused by others. They replay interactions. They question their own judgment. They feel something is off but can't name it. They sense danger but can't identify it. They know something isn't right but can't articulate it. They trust their instincts but then talk themselves out of it. They see the signs but then explain them away. They feel the warning but then ignore it. And then, when everything falls apart, they blame themselves. They blame themselves for not seeing it. They blame themselves for not trusting themselves. They blame themselves for being too trusting, too naive, too open. But the issue is rarely lack of intelligence. It's misplaced trust. It's trust in performance instead of consistency. It's trust in words instead of behavior. It's trust in hope instead of evidence. It's trust in what you want instead of what you see. Once you shift your focus from, is this real, to, what is this designed to achieve? Confusion loses its grip. You stop trying to decode intent through emotion alone. You let behavior and patterns reveal what words try to hide. You let time reveal what intensity conceals. You let consistency reveal what charm obscures. You let boundaries reveal what flattery disguises. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you protected. You learn to engage without illusion, to connect without surrender, to trust observation over hope, to trust evidence over desire, to trust what you see over what you want to see. And in a world full of engineered seduction, that kind of awareness is rare, because while most people are busy being seduced, the observer is quietly understanding. An understanding, clear, steady, unemotional understanding, is the foundation of never being trapped by a honey trap again. The false promise of perfection. Honey traps often come with a dangerous promise, the promise of perfection, the promise that someone finally understands you completely, the promise that someone finally sees you exactly as you are, the promise that someone finally accepts everything about you, the promise that someone finally loves you without condition. These promises are seductive because they speak to a deep human longing, the longing to be fully known and fully accepted, the longing to stop performing, the longing to be loved without having to earn it, the longing to be wanted without having to prove worth. But perfection is not real, and anyone who seems perfect is not showing you who they are. They are showing you who they know you want them to be. They are not revealing themselves. They are performing. They are not being real. They are being what you need. And that performance, no matter how convincing, is not sustainable. Eventually the mask slips. Eventually the performance cracks. Eventually the real person shows. And when they do, you see the gap between what they offered and what they actually are. And that gap is where the trap was. Real connection is not perfect. Real love is not flawless. Real intimacy involves imperfection. Real people disappoint. Real people have flaws. Real people are inconsistent at times. Real people have needs and wounds and struggles. Real people don't always know what to say. Real people don't always say the right thing. Real people don't always show up perfectly. Real people are not designed to please you. They are just people. And if you find someone who seems to have no flaws, who seems perfectly aligned with your desires, who seems to know exactly what you need at every moment, you are not looking at a real person. You are looking at a construction. You are looking at a mirror. You are looking at a trap. The vulnerability that makes traps work. Every honey trap exploits a vulnerability, and every person has at least one. It's not weakness. It's humanity. It's the place where life has hurt you. It's the place where you've been denied what you deserved. It's the place where you've been disappointed, betrayed, abandoned, or overlooked. It's the place where you learn to doubt yourself. It's the place where you learn to believe you weren't enough. And the honey trap finds that place. It probes gently. It listens carefully. It watches for the stories that make you emotional. It notices the topics you avoid, It observes what makes you defensive. It tracks what makes you grateful. It maps your wounds. Then it speaks directly to those wounds. It tells you what you've been waiting to hear. It gives you what you've been craving. It becomes what you've been missing, not because it cares about you, because it needs something from you. And the easiest way to get something from someone is to give them what they desperately want first. This is not a criticism of you. This is a reality of human psychology. Everyone is vulnerable. Everyone has a wound. Everyone has a hunger. And everyone at some point has been seduced by something that looked like love, but was actually extraction. The difference is not whether you have vulnerabilities. The difference is whether you recognize them, whether you've made peace with them, whether you've stopped looking for someone else to fill them, whether you've stopped believing that love will heal what only you can heal, whether you've stopped thinking that someone else's validation can make you whole. When you know your own wounds, you are harder to manipulate. When you have made peace with your own hunger, you are harder to exploit. When you are not desperate for someone to complete you, you are harder to trap. Because the honey trap works by offering completion. But if you are already whole, what can it offer that you need? If you are already enough, what can it give that you crave? If you are already secure, what can it provide that you lack? The answer is nothing. And nothing is not a trap, it's freedom. The difference between being wanted and being used. One of the hardest distinctions to make is the difference between being wanted and being used. They can feel the same, they can look the same, they can sound the same, but they are not the same. Being wanted means someone desires you for who you are. Being used means someone needs you for what you provide. Being wanted means they want your presence. Being used means they want your resources, your access, your information, your validation, your body, your status, your attention, your loyalty, your vulnerability. Being wanted means they value you. Being used means they value what you give. The honey trap confuses these two experiences. It makes being used feel like being wanted. It makes extraction feel like love. It makes consumption feel like connection. It makes transaction feel like intimacy. It makes exploitation feel like devotion. And you don't realize the difference until it's too late. Until you've given everything and they're gone. Until you've opened everything and they've taken. Until you've surrendered everything and they've walked away. Learning to distinguish between being wanted and being used is one of the most important skills you can develop. It requires slowing down. It requires observing consistency. It requires watching what happens when you say no. It requires noticing whether they value you or just your availability. It requires seeing whether they stay when you're not useful. It requires paying attention to whether they love you or just love what you give. It requires asking yourself, if I stopped giving, would they still be here? If I stopped being useful, would they still want me? If I stopped serving their needs, would they still choose me? The answers to these questions will tell you everything. The freedom of seeing clearly. When you learn to see clearly, something releases inside you. You stop being afraid of manipulation because you recognize it. You stop being vulnerable to honey traps because you see the blueprint. You stop being seduced by performance because you distinguish it from reality. You stop being confused by intensity because you know what it means. You stop being controlled by longing because you've made peace with your own wounds. You stop being desperate for connection because you have connection with yourself. You stop looking for completion in others because you are already complete. This is not coldness. This is freedom. Freedom to love without being exploited. Freedom to open without being taken. Freedom to connect without being trapped. Freedom to trust without being used. Freedom to be vulnerable without being wounded. Freedom to give without being depleted. Freedom to choose without being controlled. Freedom to live without being afraid. And that freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding the honey trap. Not because you've become suspicious of everyone, but because you've become clear about yourself. Not because you've become closed off, but because you've become discerning. Not because you've stopped believing in love, but because you've stopped believing in illusions. Understanding, clear, steady, unemotional understanding, is the foundation of never being trapped by a honey trap again. Because once you see the architecture, you can never unsee it. Once you understand the mechanics, you can never be fooled again. Once you know the blueprint, you can never be trapped, not because traps stop existing, but because you stop walking into them. Chapter 2: The Architecture of Seduction. Every honey trap follows a structure. It is not random. It is not accidental. It is not simply a matter of charm or good looks or lucky timing. It is a deliberate, phased process designed to move a target from initial contact to complete surrender. And once you understand this architecture, once you see the phases laid out clearly, you can recognize them at every stage. You can see the trap being built while it's still being built. You can see the walls going up while you still have time to walk away. The architecture of seduction is not complicated. It follows predictable patterns. It exploits predictable vulnerabilities. It uses predictable techniques. And that predictability, once recognized, is your greatest protection. Because manipulation relies on you not seeing it. It relies on you being caught up in the feeling, in the intensity, in the illusion. It relies on you not paying attention to the structure. But when you know the structure, you can observe it in real time. You can watch it being deployed. You can see the steps unfolding. And you can choose whether to continue or to leave. Phase 1: Identification and Targeting. The first phase of any honey trap is identification. The seducer identifies potential targets. They look for vulnerability. They look for access. They look for value. They look for someone who has something they need, whether that is information, resources, status, or simply the satisfaction of control. They look for someone who is hungry, lonely, insecure, ambitious, or desperate. They look for someone who is open to connection, who is seeking validation, who is looking for love, who is hoping for something more. They look for someone who has a wound that can be exploited. This identification phase is often subtle. It may not look like targeting at all. It may look like casual conversation, friendly interest, innocent curiosity. But behind that casualness, there is observation. They are watching. They are listening. They are testing. They are noticing what makes you light up, what makes you defensive, what makes you vulnerable, what makes you open. They are mapping your emotional terrain. They are identifying your needs, your fears, your desires, your wounds. They are gathering information about what you want, what you lack, what you've been denied. This is why the early stages of a honey trap can feel so good. Someone is paying attention to you. Someone is interested in you. Someone is asking questions about you. Someone wants to know everything about you. It feels like being seen. It feels like being valued. It feels like being chosen. But what is actually happening is information gathering. They are not curious about you because they care. They are curious about you because they need to know how to manipulate you. Phase 2: Mirroring and rapport building. Once the target has been identified and their vulnerabilities mapped, the next phase is rapport building. This is where the seducer begins to mirror the target. They match their energy, their interests, their values, their language. They become what the target wants to see. They reflect back the target's own desires and beliefs. They create the illusion of deep connection. They make the target feel understood, validated, and seen in a way they rarely experience. This mirroring is not accidental. It is deliberate. The seducer will adapt to the target. If the target is intellectual, they become intellectual. If the target is emotional, they become emotional. If the target is funny, they become funny. If the target is serious, they become serious. If the target has certain political views, they share them. If the target has certain values, they hold them. If the target has certain wounds, they demonstrate understanding. They become a perfect reflection of what the target wants to see. And this reflection is seductive because it validates the target's sense of self. It tells them they are right, they are good, they are worthy. This mirroring creates bonding. The target feels a sense of a familiarity, of recognition, of knowing this person on a deep level. They feel like they've found someone who truly understands them. They feel like they've found a kindred spirit. They feel like they've found their person. And this feeling, this sense of deep connection, is precisely what the seducer is engineering. They are not connecting with you. They are connecting to your reflection. They are not loving you. They are loving the image of you that you've shown them. And that image, once created, becomes the basis for everything that follows. Phase 3, vulnerability exploitation. Once rapport is established, the seducer begins to exploit the vulnerabilities they identified in Phase 1. They do this gently, incrementally. They don't demand everything at once. They don't push too hard too soon. They create a sense of safety, a sense of intimacy, a sense of trust. And then, within that trust, they begin to ask for things. Small things at first, inconsequential things, things that don't feel like a big deal, things that feel like natural expressions of connection, but each small request builds on the previous one. They might ask for your time, then your attention, then your private thoughts, then your secrets, then your access, then your resources, then your loyalty, then your trust, then your everything. Each request is small enough to feel reasonable. Each request is wrapped in affection. Each request is delivered with warmth and care. Each request makes you feel good for giving. Each request deepens your investment. Each request makes it harder to say no to the next one. This is how honey traps work. They don't take from you all at once. They take from you gradually, piece by piece, until you've given everything without realizing it. They don't force you. They invite you. They don't demand. They ask. And because you want to please them, because you want to prove your love, because you want to keep the connection alive, you give. And giving feels good. Giving feels like love. Giving feels like connection. But giving is also extraction. And extraction, disguised as love, is the heart of the honey trap. Phase 4, isolation and emotional dependency. As the target becomes more invested, the seducer begins to create isolation. Not necessarily physical isolation, but emotional isolation. They become the target's primary source of validation, support, and affection. They become the center of the target's emotional world. They are the one the target turns to for everything. They are the one who makes the target feel seen, valued, and loved. And as this happens, the target's other relationships begin to fade. They spend less time with friends. They share less with family. They become increasingly dependent on the seducer for their emotional well-being. This dependency is the goal. When the target is emotionally dependent, they are easier to control. They are less likely to question. They are less likely to resist. They are less likely to leave. They are more likely to give whatever is asked. They are more likely to justify whatever happens. They are more likely to believe that the relationship is good even when it is not. They are more likely to ignore warning signs. They are more likely to defend the seducer against anyone who tries to warn them. They are more likely to stay, even when staying costs them everything. Isolation is not always obvious, doesn't always look like keeping you away from people. It can look like being the only one who really understands you. It can look like having such a special connection that no one else could possibly relate. It can look like being so in sync that you don't need anyone else. It can look like being so devoted to each other that outside relationships feel like distractions. But whatever form it takes, isolation serves the same purpose. It makes you dependent, and dependency makes you vulnerable. Phase 5, extraction. This is the final phase, the phase where the seducer takes what they wanted all along. It might be information, it might be money, it might be access, it might be loyalty, it might be control, it might be physical or emotional exploitation. It might be years of your life, your energy, your resources, your trust. Whatever they identified in phase 1, whatever they're building toward, now they take it. And by the time they take it, it often feels too late. You've given so much, you've invested so much, you've trusted so much, you've loved so much, you've believed so much. And now, the person you trusted is asking for something that feels wrong, and you give it anyway. Because you don't want to lose them, because you don't want to believe it was all a lie, because you don't want to face what you've given and what it cost. Extraction is often disguised. It might look like a request for help. It might look like a test of loyalty. It might look like a shared endeavor. It might look like a favor. It might look like a sacrifice made for love. It might look like an expression of trust. It might look like a natural next step in the relationship, but what it actually is the culmination of the trap. Everything that came before was leading to this moment. Every glance, every word, every touch, every affirmation, every promise, every expression of love, all of it was building toward extraction. Phase 6, discard or maintenance. After extraction, there are two possible outcomes. The first is discard. The seducer has what they want, and they leave. They disappear, they become cold, they blame the target, they create distance. They move on to their next target. The target is left devastated, confused, and wondering what they did wrong. They search for answers. They replay everything. They try to understand. They try to fix it. They try to get the love back. They try to get closure. But there is no closure. There never was. The relationship was never real. The love was never real. The connection was never real. It was always a construction designed to extract something. And now that extraction is complete, the construction is being dismantled. The second outcome is maintenance. The seducer stays, but only because the target still has something to give. They continue to extract slowly, steadily over time. They continue to exploit the target's resources, energy and love. They continue to be the center of the target's world. They continue to take. The target continues to give, believing that if they just give enough, the love will finally be real. But it never is. It can never be. Because the relationship was never about love. It was always about extraction, and extraction, no matter how it's disguised, is not love. The illusion of choice. One of the most disturbing aspects of the honey trap is that it often feels like choice. The target believes they are choosing to give, choosing to stay, choosing to sacrifice. They believe they are making decisions based on love. They believe they are doing what any good partner would do. They believe they are investing in something real. And because they believe this, they don't see themselves as victims. They see themselves as lovers. They see themselves as devoted. They see themselves as committed. They see themselves as loyal. And they are all of those things. But they are also trapped, and they don't know it. This is why honey traps are so effective. They don't take away your agency. They make you use your agency against yourself. They make you give freely what you would never give under threat. They make you choose to sacrifice. They make you choose to stay. They make you choose to believe. They make you choose to trust. They make you choose to love. And all of those choices are real. They are not forced. They are not coerced. They are chosen. But they are chosen within a constructed reality. They are chosen based on false information. They are chosen because you don't know what you don't know, and that is what makes it a trap. Recognizing the architecture in real time. Now that you understand the architecture, you can begin to recognize it in real time. You can see when someone is targeting you. You can see when someone is mirroring you. You can see when someone is exploiting your vulnerabilities. You can see when someone is isolating you. You can see when someone is extracting from you. You can see when someone is discarding or maintaining you. You can see the phases unfolding. You can see the trap being built. This recognition is not about paranoia. It is about clarity. It is about seeing what is actually happening instead of what you hope is happening. It is about trusting your observations instead of your desires. It is about slowing down instead of rushing. It is about asking questions instead of accepting answers. It is about protecting yourself without closing yourself off. It is about loving without being consumed. It is about connecting without being captured. It is about being open without being naive. It is about trusting without surrendering. The architecture of seduction is powerful, but it is not invisible. Once you know what to look for, you can see it. And once you can see it, you can choose differently. You can choose not to be targeted. You can choose not to be mirrored. You can choose not to be exploited. You can choose not to be isolated. You can choose not to be extracted from. You can choose to leave before the trap closes. You can choose to protect what is yours. You can choose to value yourself. You can choose clarity over illusion. You can choose freedom. The red flags of a honey trap. Understanding the architecture is essential, but recognizing the specific red flags is equally important. These are the warning signs that indicate you may be in a honey trap. They are not always obvious. They can be subtle. They can be explained away. They can be minimized. But they are always there, and if you know what to look for, you can see them. Too fast, too soon. The relationship escalates quickly. The seducer expresses intense interest, deep connection, and profound commitment very early. They talk about love, soulmates, destiny, or forever within weeks or even days. This is not love. This is seduction. Love takes time to develop. Intimacy takes time to build. Trust takes time to earn. When someone rushes these things, they are not falling in love with you. They are creating dependency. Too perfect. The seducer seems to have no flaws. They never disagree with you. They never have needs that conflict with yours. They never have opinions that differ from yours. They never have boundaries that challenge yours. They are exactly what you want. This is not real. No one is perfect. And anyone who seems perfect is performing. They are hiding who they are to become who you want them to be. And that performance, no matter how convincing, is not sustainable. Too interested. The seducer is intensely interested in every detail of your life. They want to know about your past, your relationships, your wounds, your fears, your hopes, your secrets. They ask questions that feel intimate, that feel like deep connection. But what they are doing is gathering information. They are mapping your vulnerabilities. They are finding your soft spots. They are learning what they need to know to manipulate you. Too isolated. The relationship begins to consume your life. You spend less time with friends and family. You share less with people who love you. You become increasingly dependent on the seducer for emotional support and validation. This isolation is not accidental. It is engineered. The seducer wants to be your only source of love and approval. They want you to have no one else to turn to. They want you to be completely dependent on them. Too demanding. The seducer begins to ask for things. Small things at first, then bigger things. They ask for your time, your attention, your resources, your trust. They ask you to prove your love. They ask you to sacrifice. They ask you to give. And because you want to keep the connection, because you want to prove your devotion, you give. But each giving makes it harder to say no to the next request. Each giving deepens your investment. Each giving makes leaving harder. Too inconsistent. The seducer's behavior is inconsistent. They are warm one moment and cold the next. They are present one day and absent the next. They are loving one week and distant the next. This inconsistency is not accidental. It is designed to keep you off balance. It is designed to make you work harder for their approval. It is designed to make you crave their warmth. It is designed to make you dependent on their affection. It is designed to keep you chasing. Too defensive. The seducer becomes defensive when you question anything. When you express doubt, when you express concern, when you express confusion, they react. They may get angry. They may withdraw. They may blame you. They may accuse you of not trusting them. They may make you feel guilty for asking. This defensiveness is a sign. It is a sign that there is something to hide. It is a sign that the performance cannot withstand scrutiny. It is a sign that the illusion is fragile. Too perfect to be true. This is the most important red flag. If someone seems too good to be true, they probably are. Real people have flaws. Real relationships have challenges. Real love requires work. Real intimacy takes time. If someone seems perfect, they are not showing you who they are. They are showing you who they think you want them to be. And that is not love. That is seduction. That is manipulation. That is a honey trap. The importance of trusting your instincts. Your instincts are your greatest protection. They are not always right, but they are always worth paying attention to. That feeling that something is off, that voice that whispers doubt, that sense that something doesn't align, that is your subconscious recognizing patterns that your conscious mind has not yet processed. That is your survival system speaking, and you should listen to it. When you feel something is wrong, don't explain it away. Don't rationalize it. Don't ignore it. Pay attention to it. Ask yourself what it might be telling you. Ask yourself what you might be missing. Ask yourself what you might not want to see. Ask yourself what you might be afraid to admit. Ask yourself what the cost might be if you're right. and ask yourself what the cost might be if you're wrong and you ignore it anyway. Trusting your instincts does not mean you have to act on them immediately. It means you should take them seriously. It means you should slow down. It means you should observe more carefully. It means you should ask more questions. It means you should protect yourself until you know for sure. It means you should not dismiss your own perception. It means you should not talk yourself out of your own awareness. It means you should value your own safety over someone else's comfort. The courage to walk away. One of the hardest things to do is to walk away from something that feels good. Walking away from a honey trap, even when you recognize it, is painful. It means letting go of the illusion. It means accepting that the love was not real. It means facing the reality that you were used. It means grieving what you thought you had. It means confronting the vulnerability that made you vulnerable. It means being alone again. It means starting over. But walking away is also an act of self-respect. It is an act of courage. It is an act of choosing yourself over the illusion. It is an act of protecting your future by ending the deception now. It is an act of valuing your own worth more than their approval. It is an act of reclaiming your agency. It is an act of freeing yourself from the trap. Walking away is not failure. It is the opposite of failure. It is success. It is recognizing the truth and choosing it. It is seeing the architecture and refusing to be trapped. It is protecting yourself even when it hurts. It is loving yourself enough to leave. It is choosing clarity over illusion. It is choosing freedom. And freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding the honey trap. Not because you've become afraid of connection, but because you've become clear about what real connection is. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've become discerning about who you let in. Not because you've stopped believing in love, but because you've stopped believing in illusions. Chapter 5: The Weaponization of Emotional Dependency. There is a moment in every honey trap when something shifts. The target no longer feels like they are choosing to stay. They feel like they cannot leave. The relationship is no longer a source of joy. It is a source of anxiety. The seducer is no longer a source of comfort. They are a source of control. The connection is no longer a bond. It is a chain. And the target, who once felt so loved, so chosen, so seen, now feels trapped, confused, and utterly dependent. This is emotional dependency, and it is the most powerful weapon in the honey trap arsenal. It is the state where the target's emotional well-being is entirely tied to the seducer. It is the state where leaving feels impossible, not because of physical restraints, but because of psychological ones. It is the state where the target believes they cannot survive without the seducer's love, approval, and validation. It is the state where the target has given away their emotional autonomy and placed it in the hands of someone who will use it against them. Emotional dependency is not created overnight. It is built gradually, carefully, deliberately. It is the culmination of everything that came before. The mirroring, the vulnerability mining, the isolation, the extraction. All of these elements work together to create a state where the target is completely dependent on the seducer for their emotional stability. And once that dependency is established, the seducer has complete control. They can demand anything. They can take anything. They can do anything. Because the target cannot leave. They are emotionally imprisoned. Understanding the psychology of dependency. Dependency is not love. It is not intimacy. It is not connection. It is a psychological state where one person's emotional regulation is outsourced to another. Instead of being able to self-soothe, instead of being able to regulate their own emotions, instead of being able to find stability within themselves, the dependent person relies entirely on the other person for their sense of safety, worth, and well-being. This is not healthy. It is not sustainable. It is not real love. It is a form of emotional captivity. The dependent person cannot function without the other person. They cannot make decisions without consulting them. They cannot feel okay without their approval. They cannot feel safe without their presence. They cannot feel worthy without their validation. They cannot feel complete without their love. And this dependency, once established, is incredibly difficult to break. The seducer cultivates this dependency intentionally. They create a dynamic where the target's needs are only met by them. They create a dynamic where the target's emotional stability depends on their presence. They create a dynamic where the target feels lost without them. They create a dynamic where leaving feels like dying. They create a dynamic where the target will do anything to maintain the connection, even if that connection is destroying them. The mechanisms of dependency creation. Emotional dependency is built through several mechanisms. Each mechanism is designed to make the target more reliant on the seducer, more afraid of losing them, and more willing to sacrifice their own needs and boundaries to keep the relationship alive. The first mechanism is intermittent reinforcement. This is the practice of alternating between warmth and coldness, between presence and absence, between affection and withdrawal. The seducer is not consistent. They are not predictable. They are not reliable. They are hot and cold, present and distant, loving and withholding. This inconsistency creates a powerful psychological effect. It makes the target work harder for the warmth. It makes the target crave the affection. It makes the target anxious and uncertain. It makes the target dependent on the seducer's mood. It makes the target obsessed with earning their approval. It makes the target desperate to get back to the good times. It makes the target willing to do anything to avoid the coldness. This is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictable reward is more compelling than the consistent one. The possibility of winning keeps you playing. The possibility of getting the warmth back keeps you trying. The possibility of finally earning their love keeps you staying. You keep hoping, keep trying, keep sacrificing, keep giving, keep believing that if you just do the right thing, you'll get the love back. But the love was never real, and the warmth is just a tool. It is a tool to keep you hooked. It is a tool to keep you dependent. It is a tool to keep you trapped. The second mechanism is emotional conditioning. The seducer conditions the target to associate their emotional state with the seducer's presence. When the seducer is warm, the target feels good. When the seducer is cold, the target feels bad. When the seducer is present, the target feels safe. When the seducer is absent, the target feels anxious. When the seducer is loving, the target feels worthy. When the seducer is withholding, the target feels worthless. The seducer becomes the source of the target's emotional regulation. And when someone controls your emotional state, they control you. This conditioning happens slowly. It happens through repeated patterns of reward and withdrawal. The target learns that their emotional well-being depends on the seducer. They learn that they cannot feel good without the seducer's approval. They learn that they cannot feel safe without the seducer's presence. They learn that they cannot feel worthy without the seducer's validation. And once this learning is internalized, the dependency is complete. The target cannot leave because leaving would mean losing their only source of emotional stability. Leaving would mean falling apart. Leaving would mean facing the void that the seducer filled. Leaving would mean being alone with themselves and their pain. The third mechanism is isolation. As we discussed in earlier chapters, isolation is a key component of the honey trap. The seducer gradually isolates the target from their support network. They make the target less close to friends and family. They make the target less connected to their community. They make the target less dependent on other sources of support. They become the target's only source of validation, comfort, and connection. And once the target is isolated, they have nowhere else to turn. They cannot leave because they have nowhere to go. They cannot leave because they have no one to support them. They cannot leave because they have become completely dependent on the seducer for all of their emotional needs. The fourth mechanism is guilt and obligation. The seducer creates a sense of guilt and obligation in the target. They make the target feel responsible for the seducer's well-being. They make the target feel like they owe the seducer for all the love and attention they've given. They make the target feel like leaving would be selfish. They make the target feel like leaving would be abandoning someone who needs them. They make the target feel like leaving would be a betrayal of all the promises they made. They make the target feel like leaving would be proof that they never really loved the seducer. This guilt and obligation is powerful. It keeps the target in the relationship long after they should have left. It makes them stay when they are unhappy. It makes them stay when they are being mistreated. It makes them stay when they know they should go. Because leaving feels like a betrayal. Leaving feels like abandoning someone. Leaving feels like being a bad person. Leaving feels like failing. Leaving feels like proving that all the sacrifice was for nothing. So they stay and they sacrifice more. They stay and they give more. They stay and they lose more of themselves. They stay and they become more dependent. They stay because leaving feels impossible. The illusion of being the only one who understands. One of the most powerful tools in creating emotional dependency is the illusion of being the only one who understands. The seducer makes the target feel like no one else could possibly understand them. No one else could possibly accept them. No one else could possibly love them. No one else could possibly see them the way they do. This illusion is created through mirroring, through vulnerability mining, through validating the target's wounds and longings. When the target believes that only the seducer understands them, they become dependent. They cannot leave because no one else would understand. They cannot leave because no one else would accept them. They cannot leave because no one else would love them the way the seducer does. They cannot leave because leaving would mean losing the only person who truly gets them. Leaving would mean returning to being misunderstood. Leaving would mean returning to being alone. Leaving would mean returning to the loneliness they felt before they met the seducer. But the truth is that the seducer doesn't understand the target. They understand the target's vulnerabilities. They understand the target's wounds. They understand the target's needs. They understand what the target is hungry for. They understand how to manipulate the target. But they don't understand the target as a person. They don't understand the target's true self. They don't understand the target's depth. They don't understand the target's complexity. They don't understand the target's goodness. They don't understand the target's soul. They understand the target's weakness, and they use it. The illusion of being the only one who understands is a prison. It keeps the target isolated from everyone else. It keeps the target dependent on the seducer. It keeps the target from seeking other connections. It keeps the target from questioning the relationship. It keeps the target from seeing the truth. It keeps the target trapped. The fear of losing the love. The fear of losing the love is perhaps the most powerful force in emotional dependency. The target is terrified of losing the seducer's love. They are terrified of being abandoned. They are terrified of being rejected. They are terrified of being alone. They are terrified of the pain that would come with the loss. They are terrified of facing the emptiness that the seducer filled. They are terrified of admitting that the love was never real. This fear is not irrational. The love the target feels is real. Even if the seducer's is not, the target's love is real. They have invested deeply. They have opened completely. They have given everything. They have trusted fully. They have believed in the connection. They have planned a future. They have sacrificed for the relationship. They have built their life around the seducer. And losing all of that is terrifying. It is not just losing a person. It is losing a whole world. It is losing the self that was built around the relationship. It is losing the identity that was defined by being loved. It is losing the hope that everything was real. This fear is what keeps the target trapped. They stay because they are afraid of the pain of leaving. They stay because they are afraid of being alone. They stay because they are afraid of admitting what they already know. They stay because they are afraid of facing the truth. They stay because they are afraid of the emptiness. They stay because they are afraid of the grief. They stay because they are afraid of the loss. They stay because they are afraid of themselves. And the seducer knows this. The seducer uses this fear. They threaten withdrawal. They threaten abandonment. They threaten to stop loving. They threaten to leave. They threaten to find someone else. They threaten to withdraw their validation, and the target, terrified, complies. They do what they are told. They give what is demanded. They sacrifice what is required. They stay when they should go. They stay because the fear of losing the love is greater than the pain of staying. The tragedy of dependency. The tragedy of emotional dependency is that it is not love. It is fear dressed up as love. It is need dressed up as connection. It is desperation dressed up as devotion. It is captivity dressed up as commitment. The target believes they are staying because they love the seducer. They are actually staying because they are afraid. They are afraid of being alone. They are afraid of being unloved. They are afraid of being worthless. They are afraid of facing themselves. They are afraid of the void. They are afraid of the grief. They are afraid of admitting they were wrong. They are afraid of starting over. They are afraid of being vulnerable again. They are afraid of trusting again. They are afraid of being hurt again. This is the tragedy. The target's love, which could have been a source of joy and growth, has become a source of captivity and pain. Their vulnerability, which could have been a source of connection and intimacy, has become a source of exploitation and control. Their hope, which could have been a source of optimism and possibility, has become a source of endless waiting and disappointment. Their trust, which could have been a source of safety and security, has become a source of constant anxiety and betrayal. And the saddest part is that the target often knows. Somewhere deep down they know. They know something is wrong. They know the relationship is not healthy. They know they are being used. They know they are being manipulated. They know they are being controlled. They know they are being trapped. But they cannot admit it. They cannot face it. They cannot leave. Because leaving would mean accepting the truth. Leaving would mean accepting that the love was not real. Leaving would mean accepting that they were used. Leaving would mean accepting that they were fooled. Leaving would mean accepting that they were betrayed. Leaving would mean accepting that they were hurt. Leaving would mean accepting that they were vulnerable. Leaving would mean accepting that they were human, and that acceptance is too painful to bear. Breaking the dependency. Breaking emotional dependency is one of the hardest things a person can do. It is not just leaving a relationship. It is leaving a part of themselves. It is leaving an identity. It is leaving a source of emotional regulation. It is leaving a source of safety. It is leaving a source of meaning. It is leaving a source of purpose. It is leaving a source of love, even if that love was not real. Breaking dependency requires several things. First, it requires recognizing that the dependency exists. It requires acknowledging that the relationship is not healthy. It requires admitting that the love was not real. It requires accepting that the seducer is not who they appeared to be. It requires confronting the illusion. It requires facing the truth. This recognition is painful. It involves grief. It involves loss. It involves letting go of what was believed. It involves mourning what was hoped for. It involves accepting what was actually there. Second, it requires rebuilding the self. The target must rebuild their sense of identity. They must find their own value. They must learn to regulate their own emotions. They must learn to meet their own needs. They must learn to be alone without being lonely. They must learn to find validation within themselves. They must learn to trust themselves again. They must learn to believe in their own worth. They must learn to be whole without someone else completing them. Third, it requires reconnecting with others. The target must rebuild their support network. They must reconnect with friends and family. They must find community. They must allow themselves to be vulnerable with safe people. They must learn to trust again, even after being betrayed. They must learn to open again, even after being hurt. They must learn to love again, even after being used. This is not easy. It is not quick. It is not simple. It is a process. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes support. It takes grace. It takes self-compassion. Fourth, it requires forgiveness. Not forgiveness of the seducer necessarily, but forgiveness of themselves. The target must forgive themselves for being vulnerable. They must forgive themselves for trusting. They must forgive themselves for being used. They must forgive themselves for staying. They must forgive themselves for not seeing it sooner. They must forgive themselves for being human. They must forgive themselves for wanting love. They must forgive themselves for hoping. They must forgive themselves for believing. They must forgive themselves for being hurt. They must forgive themselves for being wounded. They must forgive themselves for being imperfect. They must forgive themselves for being human. The freedom after dependency. The freedom after dependency is profound. When the target finally breaks free, they are not just free from the seducer. They are free from themselves. They are free from the patterns that made them vulnerable. They are free from the wounds that made them hungry. They are free from the fears that kept them trapped. They are free from the illusions that blinded them. They are free from the neediness that consumed them. They are free from the dependency that enslaved them. This freedom is not immediate, it is not easy, it is not without pain, but it is real, it is lasting, it is liberating. It is the freedom to be themselves, fully and completely. It is the freedom to love without being consumed. It is the freedom to connect without being captured. It is the freedom to open without being exploited. It is the freedom to trust without being betrayed. It is the freedom to be whole without being completed. It is the freedom to be alone without being lonely. It is the freedom to be human without being ashamed. And this freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding emotional dependency. Not because you've become afraid of love, but because you've become clear about what real love is. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've become discerning about who you give your heart to. Not because you've stopped believing in connection, but because you've stopped believing in illusions. Not because you've given up on love, but because you've stopped settling for less than love. Chapter 6. The Mask of Intimacy and the Face Behind It. There is perhaps no greater illusion in the honey trap than the mask of intimacy. The target believes they are experiencing closeness, vulnerability, and genuine connection. They believe they are finally being seen, finally being understood, finally being loved. But what they are actually experiencing is a carefully constructed performance. What they are actually experiencing is a mask. What they are actually experiencing is a reflection of their own desires, expertly mirrored back to them. And what they are actually experiencing is the calculated simulation of intimacy, designed to extract everything they have to give. The mask of intimacy is one of the most sophisticated tools in the honey trap arsenal. It is the ability to create the feeling of closeness without any actual closeness. It is the ability to simulate vulnerability without any actual vulnerability. It is the ability to perform love without any actual love. It is the ability to make someone feel known while remaining completely unknown themselves. It is the ability to create a bond that feels real while actually being a trap. Most people believe they can recognize real intimacy. They believe they can tell when someone is genuine. They believe they can feel when a connection is authentic. They believe their instincts will protect them. They believe they would know if someone was pretending. But the mask of intimacy is designed to bypass these protections. It is designed to feel real. It is designed to bypass your defenses. It is designed to make you believe you have found something rare. It is designed to make you surrender your caution. It is designed to make you open your heart. It is designed to make you trust. And once you trust, the mask can come off. But by then, it is often too late. The illusion of emotional transparency. One of the most powerful aspects of the mask of intimacy is the illusion of emotional transparency. The seducer appears to be completely open. They appear to have nothing to hide. They appear to be sharing everything. They appear to be vulnerable. They appear to be honest. They appear to be genuine. They appear to be transparent. They appear to be exactly who they say they are. This transparency is an illusion. The seducer is not sharing everything. They are sharing what they want you to see. They are not being vulnerable. They are performing vulnerability. They are not being honest. They are being selectively honest. They are not being genuine. They are being strategically genuine. They are not being transparent. They are being transparent about things that don't matter while hiding what does. The seducer knows that the appearance of transparency creates trust. When someone seems to have nothing to hide, relax. When someone seems to be sharing everything, we open up. When someone seems to be vulnerable, we feel safe. When someone seems to be honest, we believe them. When someone seems to be genuine, we trust them, and trust, once given, becomes the foundation of the trap. But the appearance of transparency is not the same as real transparency. Real transparency is consistent. Real transparency is sustainable. Real transparency does not disappear when challenged. Real transparency does not become defensive when questioned. Real transparency does not hide behind claims of being misunderstood. Real transparency tolerates scrutiny. Real transparency invites examination. Real transparency does not punish questions. Real transparency does not withdraw when doubted. Real transparency is not threatened by curiosity. Real transparency does not need to be believed, it just is. The mask of intimacy is not real transparency. It is the performance of transparency. It is the appearance of openness designed to elicit your openness. It is the simulation of vulnerability designed to extract your vulnerability. It is the display of honesty designed to make you honest. It is the offering of trust designed to earn your trust. And once your trust is earned, the performance can shift. The mask can change. The intimacy can fade. The transparency can close. And you are left wondering what happened to the person who seemed so open, so honest, so genuine. The weaponization of shared secrets. One of the most effective ways the mask of intimacy works is through the sharing of secrets. The seducer shares something personal. They reveal a secret. They confess a weakness. They admit a shame. They share a wound. They tell you something they claim they have never told anyone. They make you feel special. They make you feel trusted. They make you feel chosen. They make you feel like you are the only one who knows this about them. They make you feel like the connection is unique, rare, and sacred. This sharing of secrets creates a powerful bond. It creates the illusion of intimacy. It creates the feeling of being special. It creates the sense that you are the only one who truly knows them. It creates the belief that the connection is deep and meaningful. It creates the trust that is essential for the trap to work. But the secret is often not real. The secret is often fabricated. The secret is often a tool. The secret is often designed to elicit your secrets in return. The secret is often a mirror, reflecting back what you have already revealed. The secret is often a test, designed to see how much you will share. The secret is often a trap, designed to create a bond that will be used against you. When you share your secrets in return, you give the seducer power. You give them information. You give them leverage. You give them ammunition. You give them your vulnerability. You give them your trust. You give them your heart. You give them the keys to your emotional prison. You give them everything they need to control you, and you give it willingly because you believe you are in a safe space. You believe you are with someone who understands. You believe you are with someone who cares. You believe you are with someone who would never use what you share against you. But they will. That is the point. That is the purpose of the mask. That is the reason for the performance. That is the goal of the intimacy, to get you to share, to get you to trust, to get you to open, to get you to reveal, to get you to surrender. And once you have surrendered, the mask can come off, the intimacy can end, the love can disappear, and you are left alone, vulnerable, and exposed, wondering what happened to the person who seemed to love you so completely. The difference between real intimacy and simulated intimacy. The question, of course, is how to tell the difference. How do you distinguish between real intimacy and simulated intimacy? How do you know when someone is genuinely connecting with you versus when they are performing connection? How do you protect yourself without becoming paranoid? The answer lies in several key differences. Real intimacy is consistent. Simulated intimacy is inconsistent. Real intimacy survives disagreement. Simulated intimacy collapses when challenged. Real intimacy tolerates distance. Simulated intimacy requires constant contact. Real intimacy is patient. Simulated intimacy is rushed. Real intimacy is reciprocal. Simulated intimacy is one-sided. Real intimacy is grounded in reality. Simulated intimacy is grounded in fantasy. Real intimacy accepts you as you are. Simulated intimacy accepts you only as long as you meet their needs. Real intimacy wants your well-being. Simulated intimacy wants your resources. Real intimacy is not threatened by your boundaries. Simulated intimacy is destroyed by your boundaries. Real intimacy does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be constant. It does not need to be intense. Does not need to be all-consuming. Real intimacy is comfortable with imperfection. Real intimacy is comfortable with silence. Real intimacy is comfortable with disagreement. Real intimacy is comfortable with difference. Real intimacy is comfortable with space. Real intimacy is comfortable with time. Real intimacy is comfortable with the ordinary. Real intimacy does not require drama, intensity, or constant validation. It is simply present. It is simply consistent. It is simply real. Simulated intimacy, on the other hand, requires intensity. It requires constant contact. It requires perfection. It requires agreement. It requires validation. It requires drama. It requires crisis. It requires rescue. It requires sacrifice. It requires proof. It requires demonstrations of love. It requires constant reassurance. It requires you to be everything. It requires you to give everything. It requires you to lose yourself. It requires you to abandon your boundaries. It requires you to surrender your autonomy. It requires you to depend completely. It requires you to believe the illusion. And when you can no longer maintain the illusion, the intimacy disappears. The mask comes off, and you are left with nothing. The moment the mask slips. There is always a moment when the mask slips, a moment when the performance cracks, a moment when the seducer reveals themselves, a moment when the intimacy disappears and something else emerges. This moment can be subtle. It can be easy to miss. It can be easy to explain away. It can be easy to forget, but it is always there. It is always telling. It is always revealing. The mask slips when the seducer is challenged, when you question something, when you express doubt, when you set a boundary, when you say no, when you disagree, when you refuse to give what is asked, when you withdraw your validation, when you stop being useful, when you stop being compliant, when you stop being the perfect target. In these moments, the performance stops, the mask drops, and the real person appears. The real person may be angry, they may be cold, they may be dismissive, they may be cruel, they may be manipulative, they may be threatening, they may be desperate, they may be controlling, they may be defensive, they may be avoidant, they may be punishing, they may be everything they were not before. But whatever they are no longer performing, they are no longer pretending, they are no longer wearing the mask, they are showing you who they really are. This moment is a gift, it is an opportunity, it is a warning, it is a revelation, it is the truth you have been avoiding, it is the reality you have been denying, it is the evidence you have been ignoring, it is the confirmation you have been needing, it is the answer to all your questions. It is the explanation for all your confusion. It is the truth beneath the illusion, and it is your chance to leave. But many people miss this moment. They explain it away. They rationalize it. They minimize it. They blame themselves. They blame the situation. They blame stress. They blame exhaustion. They blame anything but the truth. They tell themselves it was a one-time thing. They tell themselves it was just a bad moment. They tell themselves it will get better. They tell themselves the real person is the one they fell in love with, not the one who just revealed themselves. They tell themselves the mask is the truth and the revelation is the exception. They tell themselves they are wrong. They tell themselves they are imagining things. They tell themselves they are being too sensitive. They tell themselves they are overreacting. They tell themselves they should forgive and forget. They tell themselves they should be more understanding. They tell themselves they should be more patient. They tell themselves they should try harder. They tell themselves they should give more. And they stay. They stay with the mask. They stay with the illusion. They stay with the trap. The cost of believing the mask. The cost of believing the mask is enormous. When you believe the performance, you lose yourself. You lose your boundaries. You lose your autonomy. You lose your self-respect. You lose your trust in yourself. You lose your ability to recognize danger. You lose your sense of reality. You lose your connection to your instincts. You lose your capacity for discernment. You lose your belief in genuine connection. You lose your hope for real love. You lose your ability to open up again. You lose your faith in people. You lose your sense of safety. You lose your peace of mind. You lose your emotional well-being. You lose your time. You lose your energy. You lose your resources. You lose your youth. You lose your life. This is not an exaggeration. The cost of the mask is everything. It takes everything you have and gives nothing back. It takes your trust and returns betrayal. It takes your love and returns exploitation. It takes your vulnerability and returns weaponization. It takes your hope and returns disappointment. It takes your energy and returns exhaustion. It takes your time and returns regret. It takes yourself and returns a shell. It takes your life and returns nothing. This is why it is so important to see the mask, to recognize the performance, to distinguish between intimacy and simulation, to know the difference between love and manipulation, to trust your instincts, to trust your observations, to trust your experience, to trust what you see, not what you hope, to trust what you feel, not what you want to feel, to trust what you know, not what you are told, to trust yourself. The power of seeing clearly. When you see the mask, you are free. You are no longer trapped. You are no longer confused. You are no longer controlled. You are no longer dependent. You are no longer vulnerable. You are no longer exploited. You are no longer used. You are no longer manipulated. You are no longer deceived. You are free. This freedom is not easy. It is not comfortable. It is not without pain. It is not without grief. It is not without loss. It is not without loneliness. It is not without fear. It is not without doubt. It is not without sadness. It is not without anger. It is not without confusion. It is not without struggle. It is not without work. But it is free. It is real. It is yours. It is the freedom to see clearly, the freedom to choose wisely, the freedom to trust yourself, the freedom to love genuinely, the freedom to connect authentically, the freedom to be vulnerable safely, the freedom to open without being exploited, the freedom to give without being taken, the freedom to live without being trapped. And this freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding the mask of intimacy. Not because you've become afraid of connection, but because you've become clear about what real connection is. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've become discerning about who you let in. Not because you've stopped believing in love, but because you've stopped believing in masks. Not because you've given up on intimacy, but because you've stopped settling for the performance of intimacy. Not because you've lost hope, but because you've found clarity. And clarity, clear, steady, unshakable clarity, is where real protection begins. It is where real connection begins. It is where real love begins. It is where you begin. Chapter 7. The extraction phase and the moment of surrender. There comes a moment in every honey trap when the seducer stops building and starts taking. The mirroring, the vulnerability mining, the dependency creation, the mask of intimacy, all of it has been leading to this point. This is the extraction phase. This is the moment when the seducer finally reveals their true purpose. This is the moment when the target is to give what they would never have given willingly at the beginning. This is the moment when the trap closes. The extraction phase is often subtle. It does not always look like a demand. It does not always look like coercion. It does not always look like theft. It often looks like a request for help, a request for trust, a request for loyalty, a request for sacrifice, a request for proof of love. A request that feels reasonable, that feels natural, that feels like a natural extension of the relationship. But what it actually is the culmination of everything that came before. It is the moment when the seducer takes what they have been working toward from the very beginning. By the time the extraction phase arrives, the target is often completely unprepared. They have been conditioned to trust. They have been conditioned to give. They have been conditioned to sacrifice. They have been conditioned to believe. They have been conditioned to depend. They have been conditioned to love. And because of this conditioning, they are unable to see the extraction for what it is. They are unable to recognize the manipulation. They are unable to resist the demand. They are unable to say no. They are unable to protect themselves. They are unable to leave. The nature of extraction. Extraction is the act of taking something from the target that they would not have willingly given without the manipulation. It can take many forms. It can be information secrets, or access that the target would never have shared under normal circumstances. It can be money, resources, or property that the target would never have handed over without the emotional bond. It can be time, energy, or loyalty that the target would never have invested without the illusion of love. It can be emotional or physical intimacy that the target would never have offered without the performance of connection. It can be compliance, submission, or surrender that the target would never have agreed to without the dependency. Whatever form it takes, extraction is always the same. It is the moment when the seducer reveals that the relationship was never about love. It was never about connection. It was never about intimacy. It was never about the target. It was always about what the target could provide. It was always about what the target could give. It was always about what the target could sacrifice. It was always about what the target could be used for. The extraction is often disguised as something else. It might be disguised as a test of loyalty. If you really loved me, you would do this. It might be disguised as a shared goal. We need to do this together for our future. It might be disguised as an emergency. I need your help right now, and if you don't help me, something terrible will happen. It might be disguised as an expression of trust. I'm trusting you with this because you're the only one I can rely on. It might be disguised as a sacrifice for love. I've given so much to you, and now I just need you to give this one thing to me. But whatever disguise it wears, extraction is still extraction. It is still taking. It is still exploiting. It is still using the target. It is still completing the trap. And the target, who has been conditioned to give, who has been conditioned to trust, who has been conditioned to sacrifice, who has been conditioned to love, who has been conditioned to believe, who has been conditioned to depend, is unable to resist. The psychology of surrender. The psychology of surrender is complex. The target does not simply give up. They do not simply hand over what is asked. They surrender because they believe they have no choice. They surrender because they believe that refusing would mean losing everything. They surrender because they believe that giving is the only way to keep the love they have been given. They surrender because they believe that not giving would prove they are not worthy. They surrender because they believe that not giving would destroy the relationship. They surrender because they believe that not giving would confirm their worst fears about themselves. This is the power of the honey trap. The target is not surrendering to the seducer. They are surrendering to the fear. They are surrendering to the dependency. They are surrendering to the illusion. They are surrendering to the belief that they cannot survive without the seducer. They are surrendering to the belief that they will never be loved again. They are surrendering to the belief that they are not worthy of love. They are surrendering to the belief that they have no choice. The surrender is the final act of the trap. It is the moment when the target gives everything they have to give. It is the moment when they lose everything they have to lose. It is the moment when they become completely controlled. It is the moment when they become completely dependent. It is the moment when they become completely trapped. It is the moment when they become completely broken. The surrender is what the seducer has been working toward. It is the goal of the entire process. It is the reason for the mirroring, the vulnerability mining, the dependency creation, the mask of intimacy. All of it was leading to this moment. All of it was designed to make the target unable to resist. All of it was designed to make the target give willingly what they would never have given under threat. All of it was designed to make the target surrender their autonomy, their boundaries, their self-respect, and their future. The disguises of extraction. Extraction rarely looks like extraction. It rarely looks like theft. It rarely looks like exploitation. It rarely looks like manipulation. it almost always looks like something else. It looks like love. It looks like commitment. It looks like trust. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like a natural next step. It looks like a request that is reasonable and understandable. It looks like something that any good partner would do. It looks like something that any loving person would agree to. The disguise is essential to the trap. If extraction looked like extraction, the target would resist. If extraction looked like theft, the target would fight back. If extraction looked like exploitation, the target would leave. But extraction does not look like any of these things. It looks like love. It looks like commitment. It looks like trust. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like a natural next step. It looks like something that any good partner would do. And because it looks like these things, the target agrees. They give. They sacrifice. They surrender. And they do it willingly, believing they are doing the right thing. This is why the honey trap is so effective. It does not force the target to do anything. It makes the target want to do it. It makes the target believe it is their choice. It makes the target believe they are acting out of love. It makes the target believe they are being a good partner. It makes the target believe they are proving their worth. It makes the target believe they are securing their future. It makes the target believe they are keeping the love alive. And because they believe all of this, they give everything. They give everything they have. They give everything they are. They give everything they will ever be. The cost of surrender. The cost of surrender is devastating. When the target gives what they never should have given, they lose themselves. They lose their boundaries. They lose their autonomy. They lose their self-respect. They lose their trust in themselves. They lose their ability to recognize danger. They lose their sense of reality. They lose their connection to their instincts. They lose their capacity for discernment. They lose their belief in genuine connection. They lose their hope for real love. They lose their ability to open up again. They lose their faith in people. They lose their sense of safety. They lose their peace of mind. They lose their emotional well-being. They lose their time. They lose their energy. They lose their resources. They lose their future. They lose their life. The cost is everything. And the saddest part is that the target often gives willingly. They give because they believe it is the right thing to do. They give because they believe it will secure the love. They give because they believe it will prove their worth. They give because they believe it will make the relationship stronger. They give because they believe it is what love requires. They give because they believe they have no choice. And in giving, they lose everything. The moment of awakening. There is often a moment of awakening after the extraction, a moment when the target realizes what has happened, a moment when the illusion shatters, a moment when the mask falls away completely, a moment when the truth becomes undeniable, a moment when the target sees the relationship for what it was, a moment when the target sees the seducer for who they are, a moment when the target sees themselves for who they have become, a moment when the target finally understands. This moment can be painful. It can be devastating. It can be overwhelming. It can be all-consuming. It can feel like the world is ending. It can feel like everything was a lie. It can feel like there is nothing left. It can feel like you will never recover. It can feel like you will never trust again. It can feel like you will never love again. It can feel like you will never be whole again. It can feel like you have lost everything. But this moment is also a gift. It is the moment when the target finally sees the truth. It is the moment when the illusion is broken. It is the moment when the trap is revealed. It is the moment when the target can begin to heal. It is the moment when the target can begin to rebuild. It is the moment when the target can begin to reclaim themselves. It is the moment when the target can begin to be free. Rebuilding after surrender. Rebuilding after surrender is one of the hardest things a person can do. It requires facing the truth of what happened. It requires accepting that the love was not real. It requires accepting that they were used. It requires accepting that they were manipulated. It requires accepting that they were controlled. It requires accepting that they were broken. It requires accepting that they gave everything to someone who was never worth anything. Rebuilding requires grieving, grieving the loss of the relationship, grieving the loss of the person they thought they loved, grieving the loss of the future they imagined, grieving the loss of the self they used to be, grieving the loss of their innocence, grieving the loss of their trust, grieving the loss of their hope, grieving the loss of their faith, grieving everything that was taken from them, grieving everything that was destroyed. Rebuilding requires healing, healing the wounds that were exploited, healing the vulnerabilities that were used, healing the dependency that was created, healing the shame that was inflicted, healing the fear that was instilled, healing the doubt that was planted, healing the brokenness that was caused, healing the damage that was done, healing the self that was lost. Rebuilding requires reclaiming, reclaiming your boundaries, reclaiming your autonomy, reclaiming your self-respect, reclaiming your trust in yourself, reclaiming your ability to recognize danger, reclaiming your sense of reality, reclaiming your connection to your instincts, reclaiming your capacity for discernment, reclaiming your belief in genuine connection, reclaiming your hope for real love, reclaiming your ability to open up, reclaiming your faith in people, reclaiming your sense of safety, reclaiming your peace of mind, reclaiming your emotional well-being, reclaiming your future, reclaiming your life. Rebuilding requires forgiving, forgiving yourself for being vulnerable, forgiving yourself for trusting, forgiving yourself for being used, forgiving yourself for staying, forgiving yourself for giving, forgiving yourself for surrendering, forgiving yourself for not seeing it sooner, forgiving yourself for being human, forgiving yourself for wanting love, forgiving yourself for hoping, forgiving yourself for believing, forgiving yourself for being hurt, forgiving yourself for being wounded, forgiving yourself for being broken, forgiving yourself for being imperfect, forgiving yourself for being human. The freedom after extraction. The freedom after extraction is profound. When the target finally breaks free, they are not just free from the seducer. They are free from themselves. They are free from the patterns that made them vulnerable. They are free from the wounds that made them hungry. They are free from the fears that kept them trapped. They are free from the illusions that blinded them. They are free from the neediness that consumed them. They are free from the dependency that enslaved them. They are free from the surrender that destroyed them. This freedom is not immediate. It is not easy. It is not without pain. But it is real. It is lasting. It is liberating. It is the freedom to be themselves fully and completely. It is the freedom to love without being consumed. It is the freedom to connect without being captured. It is the freedom to open without being exploited. It is the freedom to trust without being betrayed. It is the freedom to give without being taken. It is the freedom to sacrifice without being destroyed. It is the freedom to be whole without being completed. It is the freedom to be alone without being lonely. It is the freedom to be human without being ashamed. And this freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding the extraction phase, not because you've become afraid of giving, but because you've become discerning about who you give to, not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've become wise about who you open up to, not because you've stopped believing in love, but because you've stopped settling for the illusion of love, not because you've given up on connection, but because you've learned to recognize when connection is real. Not because you've stopped trusting, but because you've learned to trust yourself first. Chapter 8. The discard phase and the devastation of being left. There is perhaps no moment more devastating in the honey trap than the discard phase. This is the moment when the seducer, having extracted everything they wanted, decides that the target is no longer useful. This is the moment when the love, which was never real, is withdrawn completely. This is the moment when the target, who has given everything, is left with nothing. This is the moment when the mask comes off permanently, and the target is forced to confront the truth that they have been used, manipulated, and abandoned. The discard phase is often sudden. It can feel like it comes out of nowhere. It can feel like a complete betrayal. It can feel like everything was a lie. It can feel like the person you loved has been replaced by a stranger. It can feel like the world has ended. It can feel like you have been destroyed, and in many ways you have. Because the discard phase is not just the end of a relationship. It is the destruction of everything you believed about yourself, about love, about trust, about the person you gave your heart to. But the discard phase is not random. It is not accidental. It is not a misunderstanding. It is not a mistake. It is the final stage of the honey trap. It is the moment when the seducer reveals that they never loved you. It is the moment when the seducer shows that they only wanted what you could give. It is the moment when the seducer demonstrates that they have no loyalty, no commitment, no care for your well-being. It is the moment when the seducer proves that you were never anything more than a tool, a resource, a source of supply. It is the moment when the trap is complete. The mechanics of the discard. The discard phase is executed in specific ways. It is not simply a breakup. It is a systematic dismantling of everything the target believed about the relationship. It is a calculated process designed to leave the target confused, devastated, and questioning their own reality. The first step is often emotional withdrawal. The seducer becomes cold, distant, and unresponsive. They stop engaging, they stop caring, they stop showing interest, they stop being present. The warmth that once made the target feel so loved is gone. The attention that once made the target feel so special is withdrawn. The connection that once felt so deep is suddenly shallow. The target is left wondering what they did wrong. They are left trying to understand why the person they love has suddenly changed. The second step is often blame shifting. The seducer blames the target for the breakdown. They claim that the target changed, that the target became too demanding, that the target stopped being the person they fell in love with, that the target was the one who ruined everything. They rewrite history. They reframe the relationship. They make the target feel responsible for the failure. They make the target feel guilty for something they didn't do. They make the target feel like they were the problem all along. The third step is often devaluation. The seducer devalues the target. They dismiss the target's contributions. They minimize the target's pain. They diminish the target's worth. They make the target feel small, insignificant, and unworthy. They say things that are cruel, dismissive, and hurtful. They act as if the target never mattered. They act as if the relationship was never important. They act as if the target is disposable, replaceable, worthless. They make the target feel like they were never good enough, never deserving of love, never worthy of being chosen. The fourth step is often the final cut. The seducer ends the relationship abruptly and completely. They disappear. They block communication. They refuse to explain. They refuse to provide closure. They refuse to acknowledge the pain they caused. They refuse to take any responsibility. They just leave. They leave the target alone, devastated and utterly confused. They leave the target to pick up the pieces of a life that has been shattered. They leave the target to wonder what happened, what went wrong, what they did to deserve this. They leave the target to suffer alone. The devastation of the discard. The devastation of the discard is profound. The target is not just losing a relationship. They are losing everything. They are losing their partner, their best friend, their confidant, their source of validation, their source of comfort, their source of meaning, their source of identity, their source of hope. They are losing the person they believed was their soulmate, their other half, their future. They are losing the dreams they built, the plans they made, the life they imagined. They are losing themselves. The target is also losing their sense of reality. They are questioning everything. They are questioning whether the love was real. They are questioning whether any of it was real. They are questioning whether they were ever loved. They are questioning whether they were ever seen. They are questioning whether they were ever valued. They are questioning whether they were ever enough. They are questioning their own judgment. They are questioning their own perception. They are questioning their own worth. They are questioning their own sanity. The target is also experiencing intense emotional pain. They are grieving. They are angry. They are confused. They are despairing. They are hopeless. They are terrified. They are alone. They are broken. They are empty. They are lost. They are in pain. They are suffering. They are barely functioning. They are holding on by a thread. They are wondering if they will ever recover. They are wondering if they will ever trust again. They are wondering if they will ever love again. They are wondering if they will ever be whole again. They are wondering if they will ever be okay again. The devastation is not just emotional, it is physical. The target may experience insomnia, loss of appetite, physical exhaustion, anxiety, depression, and even suicidal ideation. The stress of the discard can take a tremendous toll on the body. The target may feel physically ill. They may feel like they are dying. They may feel like they want to die. They may feel like there is no point in going on. They may feel like they have nothing left to live for. The shame of being discarded. One of the most painful aspects of the discard is the shame. The target feels ashamed. They feel ashamed for being fooled. They feel ashamed for trusting. They feel ashamed for being vulnerable. They feel ashamed for loving. They feel ashamed for giving so much. They feel ashamed for staying. They feel ashamed for being used. They feel ashamed for being discarded. They feel ashamed for not being good enough. They feel ashamed for being replaceable. They feel ashamed for being worthless. This shame is often amplified by the seducer's devaluation. When the seducer acts as if the target never mattered, the target internalizes that message. They start to believe that they never mattered. They start to believe that they were never worthy. They start to believe that they were never valuable. They start to believe that they were never loved. They start to believe that they were always disposable. They start to believe that they were always replaceable. They start to believe that they were always worthless. This shame is destructive. It prevents the target from seeking help. It prevents the target from talking about what happened. It prevents the target from reaching out to friends and family. It prevents the target from getting support. It prevents the target from healing. It keeps the target isolated, alone, and suffering. It keeps the target trapped in the pain of the discard. The illusion of closure. Many targets desperately seek closure after the discard. They want to understand why. They want to understand what happened. They want to understand what they did wrong. They want to understand how to fix it. They want to understand if there is any hope of reconciliation. They want to understand if the love was ever real. They want to understand if they were ever loved. They want to understand if they were ever enough. They want to understand if they were ever worthy. But closure is an illusion. The seducer will not provide closure. They cannot provide closure. They do not care about providing closure. They do not care about the target's pain. They do not care about the target's confusion. They do not care about the target's need for understanding. They are done with the target. They have moved on. They have no interest in helping the target heal. They have no interest in taking responsibility. They have no interest in providing answers. They have no interest in being honest. They have no interest in being accountable. They have no interest in being decent. They have no interest in being human. The target must find closure within themselves. They must accept that they will never fully understand. They must accept that they were used. They must accept that they were manipulated. They must accept that they were discarded. They must accept that the love was never real. They must accept that the person they loved never existed. They must accept that the relationship was always a trap. They must accept that they were never going to get the love they deserved. They must accept that they have to move on without the answers they want. They must accept that they have to heal without the closure they need. They must accept that they have to rebuild without the understanding they crave. The long road to recovery. The road to recovery after the discard is long. It is painful. It is lonely. It is frustrating. It is exhausting. It is filled with setbacks. It is filled with moments of despair. It is filled with moments of doubt. It is filled with moments of grief. It is filled with moments of anger. It is filled with moments of fear. It is filled with moments of hopelessness. It is filled with moments of wanting to give up. But the road to recovery is also possible. It is possible to heal. It is possible to recover. It is possible to rebuild. It is possible to trust again. It is possible to love again. It is possible to be whole again. It is possible to be happy again. It is possible to be free. Recovery requires time. It requires patience. It requires self-compassion. It requires support. It requires therapy. It requires healing. It requires grieving. It requires letting go. It requires rebuilding. It requires reclaiming. It requires forgiving. It requires hope. It requires courage. It requires strength. It requires persistence. It requires faith. It requires love. It requires self-love. It requires believing that you are worthy, that you are valuable, that you are enough, that you are deserving of real love, that you are deserving of genuine connection, that you are deserving of happiness, that you are deserving of peace. Recovery requires accepting that the discard was not your fault. It requires accepting that you were not the problem. It requires accepting that you were used. It requires accepting that you were manipulated. It requires accepting that you were deceived. It requires accepting that you were targeted. It requires accepting that you were victimized. Requires accepting that you were broken. It requires accepting that you were hurt. It requires accepting that you were wronged. It requires accepting that you were betrayed. It requires accepting that you were abandoned. It requires accepting that you were discarded. Recovery requires seeing the seducer clearly. It requires seeing them as they are, not as you wanted them to be. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of love. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of genuine connection. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of empathy. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of remorse. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of change. It requires recognizing that they are not capable of being the person you needed them to be. It requires recognizing that you deserve better. It requires recognizing that you deserve more. It requires recognizing that you deserve real love. Recovery requires rebuilding yourself. It requires finding yourself again. It requires rediscovering your worth. It requires reclaiming your boundaries. It requires reestablishing your autonomy. It requires reconnecting with your instincts. It requires restoring your trust in yourself. It requires renewing your hope for the future. It requires remembering who you were before you were broken. It requires becoming who you want to be after you have healed. It requires learning to love yourself again. It requires learning to trust yourself again. It requires learning to believe in yourself again. The gift of the discard. It is difficult to see the discard as a gift. It is difficult to see any good in being used, manipulated, and abandoned. It is difficult to be grateful for pain, devastation, and brokenness. But the discard can be a gift. It can be the gift of freedom. It can be the gift of clarity. It can be the gift of learning. It can be the gift of growth. It can be the gift of self-discovery. It can be the gift of resilience. It can be the gift of wisdom. It can be the gift of transformation. The discard reveals who the seducer truly is. It removes any doubt about their character. It removes any hope that they will change. It removes any possibility of reconciliation. It removes any ambiguity about the relationship. It removes any illusion about the love. It removes any confusion about what happened. It removes any denial about what you experienced. It removes any attachment to someone who never deserved you. The discard also reveals who you truly are. It reveals your capacity to love. It reveals your capacity to trust. It reveals your capacity to give. It reveals your capacity to sacrifice. It reveals your capacity to hope. It reveals your capacity to believe. It reveals your capacity to be vulnerable. It reveals your capacity to be open. It reveals your capacity to care. It reveals your capacity to be human. And while these capacities were exploited, they are also your strengths. They are your gifts. They are your humanity. The discard can be the catalyst for profound change. It can be the thing that forces you to examine your patterns. It can be the thing that forces you to heal your wounds. It can be the thing that forces you to learn to love yourself. It can be the thing that forces you to set boundaries. It can be the thing that forces you to value yourself. It can be the thing that forces you to choose differently. It can be the thing that forces you to become the person you were meant to be. And when you emerge from the devastation, when you have healed, when you have rebuilt, when you have reclaimed yourself, you will be stronger than you were before. You will be wiser than you were before. You will be more discerning than you were before. You will be more self-aware than you were before. You will be more self-loving than you were before. You will be more self-respecting than you were before. You will be more capable of recognizing real love. You will be more capable of receiving genuine connection. You will be more capable of being happy. You will be more capable of being free. The freedom after the discard. The freedom after the discard is real. It is not easy. It is not quick. It is not without pain. But it is real. It is lasting. It is liberating. It is the freedom to be yourself fully and completely. It is the freedom to love without being consumed. It is the freedom to connect without being captured. It is the freedom to open without being exploited. It is the freedom to trust without being betrayed. It is the freedom to give without being taken. It is the freedom to sacrifice without being destroyed. It is the freedom to be whole without being completed. It is the freedom to be alone without being lonely. It is the freedom to be human without being ashamed. It is the freedom to be free. Chapter 9. The Aftermath and the Long Road to Reclaiming Yourself. The aftermath of a honey trap is unlike any other experience. It is not simply the end of a relationship. It is not simply a breakup. It is not simply a disappointment. It is a complete unraveling of everything the target believed about themselves, about love, about trust, about the world, and about their own judgment. The aftermath is the period when the target must confront the full scope of what happened. It is the period when they must face the truth that they were used, manipulated, and discarded. It is the period when they must begin the long, painful, and ultimately liberating process of reclaiming themselves. The aftermath is often marked by intense emotional turmoil. The target may experience a range of emotions that feel overwhelming and contradictory. They may feel grief, anger, shame, confusion, fear, hopelessness, and despair. They may feel like they are losing their mind. They may feel like they will never recover. They may feel like they will never trust again. They may feel like they will never love again. They may feel like they will never be whole again. They may feel like they have been destroyed. But the aftermath is also the beginning of healing. It is the beginning of understanding. It is the beginning of reclaiming. It is the beginning of rebuilding. It is the beginning of becoming. It is the beginning of freedom. It is the beginning of a new life. The emotional landscape of the aftermath. The aftermath is a landscape of intense and often conflicting emotions. These emotions are not linear. They do not follow a predictable path. They do not resolve in a neat and tidy way. They come in waves. They come without warning. They come when you least expect them. They come when you think you are finally okay. They come when you think you have finally moved on. They come when you think you have finally healed. Grief is often the first emotion. The target is grieving the loss of the relationship, the loss of the person they thought they loved, the loss of the future they imagined, the loss of the self they used to be. This grief is complicated by the fact that what they are grieving was never real. They are grieving an illusion. They are grieving a fantasy. They are grieving the person they thought the seducer was. They are grieving the love they thought they shared. They are grieving the connection they thought they had. They are grieving the hope they thought was real. Anger often follows. The target becomes angry at the seducer for using them, for manipulating them, for deceiving them, for discarding them. They become angry at themselves for being vulnerable, for trusting, for staying, for giving, for surrendering. They become angry at the world for being unfair, for being cruel, for being dangerous. They become angry at everyone who didn't warn them, who didn't protect them, who didn't save them. This anger is important. It is a sign that the target is beginning to recognize the injustice of what happened. It is a sign that the target is beginning to recognize that they were wronged. It is a sign that the target is beginning to recognize that they did not deserve what happened. Shame is one of the most painful emotions of the aftermath. The target feels ashamed. They feel ashamed for being fooled. They feel ashamed for trusting. They feel ashamed for being vulnerable. They feel ashamed for loving. They feel ashamed for giving so much. They feel ashamed for staying. They feel ashamed for being used. They feel ashamed for being discarded. They feel ashamed for not being good enough. They feel ashamed for being replaceable. They feel ashamed for being worthless. This shame is destructive. It isolates the target, prevents them from seeking help. It prevents them from talking about what happened. It prevents them from healing. It keeps them trapped in the pain of the aftermath. Confusion is another common emotion. The target is confused. They are confused about what happened. They are confused about why it happened. They are confused about how they didn't see it. They are confused about who the seducer really was. They are confused about whether any of it was real. They are confused about whether they were ever loved. They are confused about whether they were ever valued. They are confused about whether they were ever enough. This confusion is overwhelming. It makes the target question their own judgment. It makes the target question their own perception. It makes the target question their own sanity. It makes the target question everything they thought they knew. Fear is also present. The target is afraid. They are afraid of being hurt again. They are afraid of being used again. They are afraid of being discarded again. They are afraid of trusting again. They are afraid of loving again. They are afraid of opening up again. They are afraid of being vulnerable again. They are afraid of being betrayed again. They are afraid of being abandoned again. They are afraid of being alone. They are afraid of never being able to trust again. They are afraid of never being able to love again. They are afraid of never being able to be whole again. They are afraid of never being able to be okay again. Hopelessness and despair are also common. The target loses hope. They lose hope for love. They lose hope for connection. They lose hope for happiness. They lose hope for the future. They lose hope for themselves. They feel like there is no point in going on. They feel like there is nothing left to live for. They feel like they have been destroyed. They feel like they will never recover. They feel like they will never be okay again. They feel like they will never be whole again. They feel like they will never be happy again. They feel like they will never be free. The tasks of the aftermath. The aftermath is not a passive experience. It is not something that simply happens to the target. It is something that the target must actively work through. There are specific tasks that the target must complete in order to heal. These tasks are difficult. They are painful. They are exhausting. They are necessary. The first task is to accept what happened. The target must accept that they were used. They must accept that they were manipulated. They must accept that they were deceived. They must accept that they were discarded. They must accept that the love was never real. They must accept that the person they loved never existed. They must accept that the relationship was always a trap. They must accept that they were targeted. They must accept that they were victimized. They must accept that they were broken. They must accept that they were hurt. They must accept that they were wronged. They must accept that they were betrayed. They must accept that they were abandoned. They must accept that they were discarded. This acceptance is painful. It requires facing the truth. It requires letting go of denial. It requires letting go of hope. It requires letting go of the illusion. It requires letting go of the dream. It requires letting go of the fantasy. It requires letting go of everything they believed. The second task is to grieve. The target must grieve the loss of the relationship. They must grieve the loss of the person they thought they loved. They must grieve the loss of the future they imagined. They must grieve the loss of the self they used to be. They must grieve the loss of their innocence. They must grieve the loss of their trust. They must grieve the loss of their hope. They must grieve the loss of their faith. They must grieve everything that was taken from them. They must grieve everything that was destroyed. They must grieve everything that was lost. This grief is necessary. It is the only way to move through the pain. It is the only way to let go. It is the only way to heal. The third task is to process the shame. The target must confront the shame that they feel. They must recognize that the shame is not theirs to carry. They must recognize that they were not the problem. They must recognize that they were not the cause. They must recognize that they were not responsible for being used. They must recognize that they were not responsible for being manipulated. They must recognize that they were not responsible for being deceived. They must recognize that they were not responsible for being discarded. They must recognize that they were the victim, not the perpetrator. They must recognize that they were the one who was wronged, not the one who wronged. They must recognize that they are not worthless. They must recognize that they are not replaceable. They must recognize that they are not disposable. They must recognize that they are worthy. They must recognize that they are valuable. They must recognize that they are enough. This processing of shame is difficult. It requires challenging the internalized messages of worthlessness. It requires challenging the belief that they deserved what happened. It requires challenging the belief that they were not good enough. It requires challenging the belief that they were not worthy of love. It requires replacing these beliefs with the truth that they are worthy, the truth that they are valuable, the truth that they are enough, the truth that they deserve real love, the truth that they deserve genuine connection. The fourth task is to rebuild self-trust. The target must learn to trust themselves again. They must learn to trust their judgment. They must learn to trust their perception. They must learn to trust their instincts. They must learn to trust their feelings. They must learn to trust their boundaries. They must learn to trust their choices. They must learn to trust themselves. This is one of the most important tasks of the aftermath. The target has been conditioned to doubt themselves. They have been conditioned to question their own reality. They have been conditioned to ignore their instincts. They have been conditioned to override their boundaries. They have been conditioned to distrust their own judgment. Rebuilding self-trust requires practice. It requires paying attention to how you feel. It requires honoring your instincts. It requires respecting your boundaries. It requires listening to your intuition. It requires believing yourself. It requires trusting yourself. The fifth task is to reconnect with others. The target must reconnect with the people who genuinely care about them. They must reach out to friends and family. They must share what happened. They must ask for support. They must allow themselves to be held. They must allow themselves to be comforted. They must allow themselves to be loved. This reconnection is essential. The target has been isolated. They have been cut off from their support network. They have been made to believe that only the seducer understood them. They have been made to believe that only the seducer truly cared. They have been made to believe that only the seducer could love them. Reconnecting with others breaks this isolation. It reminds the target that they are not alone. It reminds the target that they are loved. It reminds the target that they are worthy of genuine connection. It reminds the target that they are capable of being loved. It reminds the target that there is life beyond the trap. The sixth task is to find meaning. The target must find meaning in what happened. They must find a way to make sense of their experience. They must find a way to grow from it. They must find a way to become stronger. They must find a way to become wiser. They must find a way to become more discerning. They must find a way to become more self-aware. They must find a way to become more self-loving. They must find a way to become more self-respecting. This meaning-making is essential. Without meaning, the experience remains a source of pain and confusion. With meaning, the experience becomes a source of growth and transformation. The target can use what they learn to protect themselves in the future. They can use what they learn to choose better partners. They can use what they learn to set healthier boundaries. They can use what they learn to trust themselves more. They can use what they learn to love themselves more. They can use what they learn to be free. The process of reclaiming yourself. Reclaiming yourself after a honey trap is not a one-time event. It is a process. It is a journey. It is a series of steps that lead you back to yourself. It is the process of rediscovering who you are, what you value, what you need, what you want, what you deserve. It is the process of rebuilding your identity, your boundaries, your self-trust, your self-worth. It is the process of becoming whole again. The first step in reclaiming yourself is to reconnect with your own identity. The target has lost themselves in the relationship. They have given so much of themselves to the seducer that they no longer know who they are without them. They have adapted to the seducer's needs. They have shaped themselves to fit the seducer's desires. They have abandoned their own interests, their own values, their own goals, their own dreams. They have become a shadow of the person they used to be. Reconnecting with your own identity means rediscovering what you love. It means remembering what you enjoy. It means returning to the activities that used to bring you joy. It means exploring new interests. It means pursuing your own goals. It means honoring your own values. It means living your own life. It means becoming the person you were always meant to be. The second step is to rebuild your boundaries. The target has had their boundaries systematically dismantled. They have been conditioned to give, to sacrifice, to comply, to surrender. They have lost the ability to say no. They have lost the ability to protect themselves. They have lost the ability to prioritize their own needs. Rebuilding your boundaries means learning to say no. It means learning to recognize when something is not okay. It means learning to protect yourself. It means learning to honor your own needs. It means learning to prioritize your own well-being. It means learning to set limits. It means learning to enforce those limits. It means learning to walk away from people and situations that are not good for you. The third step is to heal your wounds. The target's wounds were exploited by the seducer. The wounds that existed before the honey trap are now even deeper. The wounds of rejection, abandonment, worthlessness, and unlovability have been reinforced and amplified. These wounds must be healed. They must be addressed. They must be processed. They must be released. Healing your wounds requires therapy. It requires working with a professional who can help you understand the roots of your vulnerability. It requires processing the pain of the past. It requires releasing the shame and guilt that you carry. It requires learning to love yourself. It requires learning to accept yourself. It requires learning to believe that you are worthy of love. It requires learning to believe that you deserve to be treated well. It requires learning to believe that you are enough. The fourth step is to reclaim your trust. The target has lost trust in themselves and in others. They have been betrayed so deeply that they don't know how to trust again. They don't know how to trust their own judgment. They don't know how to trust their own instincts. They don't know how to trust their own feelings. They don't know how to trust other people. They don't know how to trust love. They don't know how to trust connection. Reclaiming your trust requires practice. It requires slowly allowing yourself to trust again. It requires starting small. It requires trusting yourself in small ways. It requires trusting others in small ways. It requires learning to distinguish between genuine trustworthiness and manipulation. It requires learning to listen to your instincts. It requires learning to honor your boundaries. It requires learning to be discerning. It requires learning to trust yourself enough to know when someone is safe. The fifth step is to embrace your future. The target has been so focused on the past that they have lost sight of the future. They have been so consumed by the pain of what happened that they have forgotten that there is a life beyond the trap. They have been so overwhelmed by the grief and loss that they have lost hope for what is to come. Embracing your future means letting go of the past. It means accepting what happened and choosing to move forward. It means not letting the honey trap define the rest of your life. It means believing that you can heal. It means believing that you can love again. It means believing that you can trust again. It means believing that you can be happy again. It means believing that you can be whole again. It means believing that you can be free. It means believing in yourself. It means believing in your future. The transformation of the aftermath. The aftermath is not just about survival. It is about transformation. It is about becoming someone new. It is about becoming someone stronger, wiser, more discerning, more self-aware, more self-loving, more self-respecting. It is about becoming someone who can never be trapped again. The aftermath is the crucible in which you are forged anew. It is the fire that burns away the illusions. It is the pressure that crystallizes the wisdom. It is the darkness that reveals the light within you. It is the pain that opens your heart to true healing. It is the loss that teaches you the value of yourself. It is the betrayal that teaches you the meaning of discernment. It is the heartbreak that teaches you the power of self-love. It is the devastation that teaches you the strength of your own spirit. It is the destruction that clears the path for a new life, a new identity, a new way of being. When you emerge from the aftermath, you are not the same person you were before. You are stronger, you are wiser, you are more discerning, you are more self-aware, you are more self-loving, you are more self-respecting, you are more capable of recognizing real love. You are more capable of receiving genuine connection. You are more capable of being happy. You are more capable of being free. You are more capable of being yourself. The gift of the aftermath. The aftermath is a gift. It is the gift of clarity. It is the gift of freedom. It is the gift of learning. It is the gift of growth. It is the gift of self-discovery. It is the gift of resilience. It is the gift of wisdom. It is the gift of transformation. It is the gift of becoming the person you were always meant to be. The aftermath is not something to be feared. It is something to be embraced. It is not something to be avoided. It is something to be experienced. It is not something to be endured. It is something to be transformed by. It is the path to healing. It is the path to wholeness. It is the path to freedom. It is the path to yourself. And when you walk this path, when you face the pain, when you do the work, when you heal the wounds, when you rebuild the self, when you reclaim your life, you will emerge on the other side. And on the other side, there is freedom. On the other side, there is peace. On the other side, there is joy. On the other side, there is love. On the other side, there is you, whole, complete, free, unbroken. Chapter 10, The Calm Observer and the Freedom of Never Being Trapped Again. There is a final stage in the journey of understanding honey traps. It is the stage where the target, having survived, healed and reclaimed themselves, becomes something new. They become the calm observer. They become someone who can see the architecture of manipulation clearly, without being consumed by it. They become someone who can recognize the signs of a honey trap without being seduced by it. They become someone who can protect themselves without becoming cold, suspicious, or closed off. They become someone who can live freely, love openly, and trust wisely, because they have learned to see clearly. The calm observer is not someone who is afraid of manipulation. They are not someone who is paranoid about every interaction. They are not someone who trusts no one. They are someone who has integrated the lessons of their experience so deeply that they can navigate the world with clarity and discernment. They are someone who has learned to distinguish between genuine connection and performance, between real love and engineered seduction, between safety and danger, between what is real and what is an illusion. This is the ultimate freedom, the freedom of not being trapped again, not because traps don't exist, they do. Not because you won't encounter manipulators, you will, but because you will see them, you will recognize them, you will know what they are, and you will choose differently. You will choose to walk away. You will choose to protect yourself. You will choose to love only those who are capable of real love. You will choose to trust only those who are trustworthy. You will choose to give only to those who are worthy. You will choose to be free. The characteristics of the calm observer. The calm observer has developed specific characteristics that protect them from honey traps. These characteristics are not innate. They are learned. They are developed through experience, through healing, through self-awareness, and through wisdom. They are the result of having been through the fire and emerged stronger on the other side. The first characteristic is discernment. The calm observer has developed the ability to distinguish between genuine connection and manipulation. They can see the difference between someone who is truly interested in them and someone who is performing interest. They can see the difference between someone who is sharing vulnerability and someone who is performing vulnerability. They can see the difference between someone who is building intimacy and someone who is building a trap. This discernment is not suspicious. It is wise. It is the result of having learned to pay attention to behavior rather than words, to consistency rather than intensity, to patterns rather than promises, to evidence rather than hope. The second characteristic is self-trust. The calm observer has learned to trust themselves. They trust their instincts. They trust their judgment. They trust their perceptions. They trust their feelings. They trust their boundaries. They trust their choices. They trust themselves to know when something is wrong. They trust themselves to protect themselves. They trust themselves to walk away. This self-trust is the foundation of their protection. It is what allows them to see clearly and act wisely. It is what prevents them from being manipulated, because they trust their own perception more than they trust the seducer's performance. The third characteristic is emotional regulation. The calm observer has learned to regulate their emotions. They are not controlled by their feelings. They can feel intense emotions without being consumed by them. They can experience attraction without surrendering to it. They can experience desire without being controlled by it. They can experience fear without being paralyzed by it. They can experience hope without being blinded by it. They can experience love without losing themselves in it. This emotional regulation is not suppression. It is mastery. It is the ability to feel fully while remaining grounded. It is the ability to experience emotion without being ruled by it. The fourth characteristic is boundaries. The calm observer has clear, strong boundaries. They know what they will accept and what they will not. They know what is okay and what is not. They know what they need and what they will not tolerate. They can say no without guilt. They can walk away without remorse. They can protect themselves without apology. These boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They are the standards that protect the calm observer from those who would use them. The fifth characteristic is self-worth. The calm observer knows their worth. They know that they are valuable. They know that they are enough. They know that they are deserving of love. They know that they are deserving of respect. They know that they are deserving of genuine connection. They know that they do not need to prove their worth to anyone. They know that they do not need to earn love through sacrifice. They know that they do not need to be chosen to be worthy. This self-worth is the foundation of their discernment. It is what allows them to walk away from those who do not value them. It is what allows them to choose themselves over the illusion of love. The practices of the calm observer. The calm observer has developed specific practices that maintain their clarity and protect them from manipulation. These practices are not complicated. They are simple. They are consistent. They are the habits of a life lived with awareness. The first practice is observation. The calm observer observes before they engage. They watch. They listen. They notice. They pay attention to behavior. They pay attention to consistency. They pay attention to patterns. They pay attention to what is shown, not just what is said. They pay attention to how someone treats others. They pay attention to how someone handles disagreement. They pay attention to how someone responds to boundaries. They pay attention to how someone behaves when no one is watching. They pay attention to the gap between words and actions. They pay attention to the small things that reveal character. This observation is not suspicious. It is not cynical. It is not judgmental. It is simply paying attention. It is seeing what is actually there, rather than what you hope is there. It is noticing the reality of who someone is, rather than the fantasy of who you want them to be. It is seeing clearly, without the distortion of hope, fear, or desire. The second practice is patience. The calm observer does not rush. They do not rush into relationships. They do not rush into intimacy. They do not rush into trust. They do not rush into love. They let things unfold naturally. They let time reveal what intensity conceals. They let consistency prove what words promise. They let behavior demonstrate what character holds. They are not in a hurry. They know that real connection takes time. They know that genuine love is patient. They know that trust is earned, not given. They know that intimacy is built, not demanded. They know that anything worth having is worth waiting for. This patience is not avoidance. It is not fear. It is not reluctance. It is wisdom. It is the understanding that rushing into connection is a vulnerability. It is the understanding that intensity is not intimacy. It is the understanding that speed is often a sign of manipulation. It is the understanding that the right person will not rush you. The right person will respect your pace. The right person will wait. The third practice is questioning. The calm observer asks questions. They ask themselves questions. They ask others questions. They ask, what is this person's intention? They ask, what is the pattern of their behavior? They ask, what is the consistency of their actions? They ask, what happens when I set a boundary? They ask, what happens when I say no? They ask, what happens when I express doubt? They ask, what is the gap between their words and their actions? They ask, were they not showing me? They ask, what is their history with others? They ask, what is the cost of this connection? These questions are not accusatory. They are not confrontational. They are simply the questions of someone who wants to see clearly. They are the questions of someone who is not willing to be deceived. They are the questions of someone who values their own safety over someone else's comfort. They are the questions of someone who is not willing to sacrifice their well-being for the illusion of love. The fourth practice is trusting instincts. The calm observer trusts their instincts. They do not override their gut feelings. They do not rationalize away their discomfort. They do not explain away their unease. They do not talk themselves out of their own perception. They listen to the voice inside that tells them something is off. They honor the feeling that whispers warning. They pay attention to the sense that something is not right. This trust in instincts is not paranoia. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that your unconscious mind processes information that your conscious mind may not have access to. It is the recognition that your body knows things that your mind has not yet articulated. It is the recognition that the feeling of unease is often the first signal of danger. It is the recognition that protecting yourself is more important than being polite. It is the recognition that your safety is more important than someone else's feelings. The fifth practice is self-care. The calm observer takes care of themselves. They prioritize their own well-being. They honor their own needs. They respect their own limits. They protect their own energy. They nourish their own body. They nurture their own soul. They invest in their own growth. They cultivate their own happiness. They build their own life. This self-care is not selfish. It is essential. It is the foundation of discernment. It is the source of self-trust. It is the basis of self-worth. It is the wellspring of emotional regulation. It is the anchor of boundaries. When you take care of yourself, you are less vulnerable to those who would use you. When you honor your own needs, you are less dependent on others for validation. When you invest in your own life, you are less desperate for someone else to complete you. When you cultivate your own happiness, you are less susceptible to the illusion of love. The freedom of the calm observer. The freedom of the calm observer is profound. It is the freedom to live without fear. It is the freedom to love without being consumed. It is the freedom to connect without being captured. It is the freedom to trust without being betrayed. It is the freedom to give without being taken. It is the freedom to sacrifice without being destroyed. It is the freedom to be vulnerable without being exploited. It is the freedom to open without being wounded. It is the freedom to choose without being controlled. It is the freedom to be yourself without being used. This freedom is not the absence of risk. There is always risk in human connection. There is always the possibility of being hurt. There is always the possibility of being disappointed. There is always the possibility of being betrayed. There is always the possibility of being used. But the calm observer is not afraid of these risks. They have accepted them. They have made peace with them. They know that being open is a risk. They know that loving is a risk. They know that trusting is a risk. They know that vulnerability is a risk. But they also know that the alternative of closing off, of never loving, of never trusting, of never being vulnerable, is a greater risk. The alternative is a life without connection. The alternative is a life without love. The alternative is a life without intimacy. The alternative is a life without meaning. The alternative is a life without joy. The alternative is a life without freedom. So the calm observer chooses to love. They choose to trust. They choose to be vulnerable. They choose to connect. They choose to open. They choose to give. They choose to sacrifice. But they do all of these things with awareness. They do them with discernment. They do them with boundaries. They do them with self-trust. They do them with self-worth. They do them with wisdom. They do them with clarity. They do them with freedom. The final integration. The journey through the honey trap is a journey of profound transformation. It is a journey from innocence to wisdom, from vulnerability to strength, from naivety to discernment, from dependency to freedom, from brokenness to wholeness, from being trapped to being free. This journey is not easy. It is not quick. It is not without pain. But it is worth it. It is worth it because at the end of the journey, you are no longer the same person. You are no longer the person who could be used. You are no longer the person who could be manipulated. You are no longer the person who could be trapped. You are no longer the person who could be broken. You are no longer the person who could be discarded. You are now the person who sees. You are the person who knows. You are the person who is free. The lessons of the honey trap are not just about protecting yourself from seducers. They are about understanding human psychology. They are about understanding yourself. They are about understanding your wounds. They are about understanding your vulnerabilities. They are about understanding your strengths. They are about understanding your worth. They are about understanding what you deserve. They are about understanding what real love looks like. They are about understanding what genuine connection feels like. They are about understanding the difference between illusion and reality. They are about understanding the difference between performance and authenticity. They are about understanding the difference between being used and being loved. These lessons are not just for protecting yourself. They are for living a full and meaningful life. They are for loving deeply and authentically. They are for connecting with others in genuine and meaningful ways. They are for trusting wisely and responsibly. They are for being vulnerable safely and intentionally. They are for giving freely and joyfully. They are for receiving openly and gratefully. They are for being human fully and completely. The invitation. The final chapter of this audio book is an invitation. It is an invitation to become the calm observer. It is an invitation to integrate these lessons into your life. It is an invitation to protect yourself without becoming closed. It is an invitation to love without being consumed. It is an invitation to trust without being naive. It is an invitation to be vulnerable without being exploited. It is an invitation to give without being taken. It is an invitation to live without being trapped. This invitation is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. It is a way of being. It is a way of seeing. It is a way of moving through the world with awareness and intention. It is a way of choosing yourself every day, in every interaction. It is a way of honoring your boundaries, your needs, your worth. It is a way of staying grounded while staying open. It is a way of being present while being wise. It is a way of living fully while staying free. You have been through the fire. You have survived. You have healed. You have grown. You have transformed. You are not the same person you were when you began this journey. You are stronger. You are wiser. You are more discerning. You are more self-aware. You are more self-loving. You are more self-respecting. You are more capable of recognizing real love. You are more capable of receiving genuine connection. You are more capable of being happy. You are more capable of being free. Now it is time to live, to love, to connect, to give, to receive, to be vulnerable, to be open, to be yourself, to be human, to be whole, to be free. And when you live this way with clarity, with discernment, with self-trust, with self-worth, you will never be trapped again. Not because traps don't exist. They do. Not because manipulators don't exist. They do. But because you will see them. You will recognize them. You will know them. And you will choose differently. You will choose to walk away. You will choose to protect yourself. You will choose to love only those who are capable of real love. You will choose to trust only those who are trustworthy. You will choose to give only to those who are worthy. You will choose to be free. And that freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable freedom, is the real power of understanding the honey trap, not because you've become afraid of love, but because you've become clear about what real love is, not because you've closed yourself off. but because you've become discerning about who you let in. Not because you've stopped believing in connection, but because you've stopped believing in illusions. Not because you've given up on love, but because you've learned to recognize the real thing. Not because you've lost hope, but because you've found clarity. And clarity, clear, steady, unshakable clarity, is where true protection begins. It is where true connection begins. It is where true love begins. It is where true freedom begins. It is where you begin.